Well, welcome everyone to the April 22nd Planning Commission meeting. Happy Earth Day, everyone. And just as I mentioned before, the Wild Game's at 8:30. So if everyone could keep that in mind as we go along tonight, it's all up to everyone that I see around me to make that happen. Just kidding, of course. So welcome. The first thing, Jackie, if you could call to order, please.
Here.
Here.
Commissioner Stroud.
Here.
Commissioner Seeley. Here. Commissioner Helva. Here. Commissioner Nemerov.
Here.
Commissioner Forrest.
Here.
Chair Platt.
Here. So the first thing is the approval of the meeting agenda. And one thing I'll bring up right now is there's no consent agenda because usually what's on there is the meeting notes, meeting minutes from last one, and those aren't available yet. So having said that, are there any additions to the meeting agenda? Deletions? Hearing none, I'd take a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up is community comment during this time. Anyone can come forth 3 minutes to the microphone and tell us your thoughts. The only thing we'd ask is if there's something on the agenda later that you're here for, if you would wait for that and you'll have a chance to speak at that time. Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the community comment session.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. So next up are public hearings. We have one tonight, subdivision for Janine and Jeffrey Johnson. And Planner Teague, welcome, and you'll be presenting it, I presume?
I will. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Our lone public hearing this evening is for a subdivision at 5825 Ashcroft Avenue, located south of City Hall, the Edina Country Club, east of Highway 100, kind of in the Concord-Pamela Park area, west side of Pamela Park. The property is highlighted on the map. As you see, it is oversized when compared to the immediate block. It's double the size of all lots along this block and the block behind. This is an area that was originally platted with 50-foot wide lots. What you're seeing here is the original plat. You can see when this property was built, or the home was built in 1953, and at that time the property owner purchased two 50-foot wide lots, combined them, and built one single-family home, Rambler style, as you see on the aerial here. This is a photograph of the existing home. So what the applicant is proposing is to divide the property into two 50-foot wide lots, essentially reestablishing the original plat. The existing home obviously would have to be removed with two new homes that would be located generally in the location of the existing footprint of the home. Closer look at this is the existing home as it sits today. You see there are a few trees on the site, not too many. They would not be disturbed with the building pads as shown here. This plat would be subject to the new tree ordinance, so should those trees be removed, they would have to be replaced. There's no plans, however, to remove those trees. Minimum lot size in this area is 9,000 square feet, 75 feet in width, and 135 feet in depth. As the Commission recalls, in neighborhoods where the lots are larger than 9,000 square feet, 75 feet in width, the minimum lot size becomes the median of all homes within 500 feet. However, in this neighborhood, all of the lots are smaller than the minimums required. So the median in this area is 6,790 square feet. The median width is 50, and the depth is 135. So while the proposal is consistent with the median, it does require variances from the minimum lot area of 9,000 square feet and 75 feet in width. So the requests before the Planning Commission are for those two variances and the subdivision, the preliminary plat. So the primary issue for consideration is in regard to the variances. Are the variance findings and criteria met? In this case, staff does believe that the criteria is met. The practical difficulty in this situation, it's the existing size of the lot. It's not a condition that was created by the applicant. Again, it was the original property owner who combined those two properties. So they're sitting today with a lot that's double the size of everyone else on this block. Again, you see the original plat. So staff also believes the request is reasonable. It's again similar to everything that you see across the street, to the north, to the south, and to the east on this block. Again, it restores that original plat. If this were denied, they would be denied a use and a size of lot that everyone else on this block has today. There have been similar variances requested in this area. This is a map showing over about the last 8 or 9 years. 3 of them have been approved and 3 have been denied. So the 3 that have been approved are kind of this upper area here, 1, 3, and 4, and those denied a little bit further south. To show you some of the detail, so this was one that was approved at 5920 Oak Lawn. As you can see, the proposed subdivision was the last one on the block, similar to the one before you this evening. So again, this one was approved. To show you a couple that have been denied, and this one down in Concord, this is the most recent denial. This was back in 2012. So it's a corner lot here, and you notice the lots are larger to the south, and there's some larger lots to the west, the adjacent property to the east. So the median in this instance came in at over 10,000 square feet, and the median width was 77 feet. So that one was denied. And then some over closer to Pamela Park, which is right in here. This one on Oak Lawn was one that was denied. And there was this one on Brookview that's actually shows up on our list in the staff report twice. One was withdrawn and one was denied. Again, this is an area where there are lots that are 100 feet in width, and so those were denied. So in conclusion, based on the findings that are in the staff report, staff is recommending approval of this request subject to the conditions that are also outlined. So with that, I can stand for any questions.
Thanks, Gary. Any questions for Planner Teague? Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure if there is some geographic favoritism in regards to accepting or denying subdivisions, but where does this particular lot fall in relation to the ones that have been approved and denied?
Good question. It's located roughly right here.
Okay.
So kind of in this northern area where they have been approved.
Okay.
This area up here, the lots are smaller. Down a little bit further south, there are more lots that developed as 100-foot wide lots.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Commissioner Forrest.
I understand that 250-foot wide lots are a reasonable use, but what's actually the practical difficulty here? Because they are not being denied the use of their property as others in the neighborhood can use theirs. They have a house on it.
They certainly have a use of their property, but the practical difficulty or the physical uniqueness of the site is the fact that, let's go back to the site, that they are sitting on a lot that's double the size of everyone else on the block here. So they have reasonable use of their property, but is it reasonable in the context of everyone else on the block has a 50-foot wide lot?
And what makes it unreasonable then, that you can't have 2 houses on that parcel?
Well, it's somewhat subjective. You could think it's reasonable to have a single-family home on the property today.
I guess what I want to know is what's the difficulty here? Because, to me, to have 2 homes there, the only thing I can see is the economic advantage, and that's informative but not definitive in our decision, too. So.
Yep, and you can certainly have that opinion. There's no right or wrong in variances, as you know. So it's a question of reasonableness. Is it reasonable to require them to have 100-foot wide lot where everyone else on the block has a 50-foot wide lot? So,
Commissioner Hobbs.
Did we get any correspondence from any of the neighbors?
did not, either for or against.
Commissioner Lee.
I actually landed on that same point there. I was kind of questioning how did that end up under the category of justification for practical difficulty. Unless there were different setbacks or something like that extended on a larger lot, but I don't believe that that's an issue here. I'm just thinking maybe it would be more helpful if under that category that it would explain more about literally the ability to develop the land, sell off a half, one half of the parcel. That could be perceived as a difficulty versus I have a big lot and I don't enjoy the benefits of a smaller lot. That's not quite a difficulty. So I had the same reaction.
Commissioner Navarro.
There's a couple of trees in the front yard, one kind of on the north end of the property and one sort of on the south end of the property. The one on the south end, will any adjustment to that tree be required to build two houses? And will the one on the north end, will creative engineering be required to put in a driveway?
So the trees you're referring to would be this one down here? Is that the one? At least the footprints that they're showing today, the trees could be retained. Now, those kind of things would be reviewed as part of a specific building permit that would come in on each individual lot.
I think probably a photo from the street view would probably show a little differently the layout of the trees. So yeah, that's it right there. Towards the blue house there. You see it's got all these branches. The one on the south end of the lot, all these branches that are coming north.
I believe this one's on the neighbor's property. The big one here? Yes. Okay, so that is the one that's shown on the...
And so I'm wondering, with that tree, will anything have to change? Will that tree be affected? And then on the one on the north end, I'm just wondering how the driveway would be laid out.
I'm wondering if maybe the applicant could speak to that too. Unless you have a particular point of view on that.
I think it's, as you state, it depends where that driveway is going to go.
Yeah. Anything else for Carrie? Thank you. So next, if the applicant wants to give us a little bit of insight, what's going on and what your thoughts are?
They've got a PowerPoint too.
You just also introduce yourself and tell us where you live. Maybe we know that already, but...
Yes. I'm Jeffrey Johnson. I live at 5825 Ashcroft Avenue, and with me today are Janine Johnson. She and I are wife and husband. We're the owners of that property. And to the left of Janine is Kim Moline. She's our real estate agent who's advising us in this process. So thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I think I'll be able to answer some questions about the tree and some things. And I have a little PowerPoint presentation, not a long one, but one that I wanted to present. So our property is located in what's called the Concord neighborhood of the city of Edina, if you're familiar with that neighborhood. Ashcroft Avenue is a very small street. It only runs three blocks long. It's east of Highway 100, and it's west of Wooddale Avenue. So it's kind of between the school grounds and to the east of the school grounds. Kind of a small little street, and we sit middle of the block at 5825. We've been residents of Edina since June of 1980, and we bought this property and have lived in it since July of 1981. Here's where our property sits. You'll notice that it's mid-block. On the screen there you can see where 59th Street is, Ashcroft, and we're kind of mid-block there. There's a couple of lots to the north that would be just off of the screen there that would take us up to 58th. Here's a closer image that will identify the property as it's laid out right now. This property is two lots that were in what's called the Fairfax Plat of the city. And so it's lots 17 and 18. You'll see those configured on this drawing. Lots 17 and 18, it's block 7 in this Fairfax Plat. And each of those are 50-foot wide lots, and they're almost 136 feet deep, and that's the size of the two lots. The legal description, again, is lots 17 and 18 of Block 7 of the Fairfax plat. That's the way it was platted back in the 1940s when that plat came into the city. But most of the homes that are built in the Fairfax plat were built actually in the early 50s, kind of post-war. And there was a huge building boom that occurred then because Edina High School was built in 49, Concord School was built in 52, and then in 56, the junior high school, which is now called the middle school, was built. So that created a huge incentive to kind of fill this neighborhood out. The north lot was purchased by the former owner that we bought the property from in 1981. They bought the lot, the north lot, in 1953 and built the 3-bedroom Rambler. That sits entirely on the north lot. The following year, in 1954, they bought the adjoining lot to the south, lot 17, and they pulled a building permit in 1954 to build a breezeway and a double garage. I'm not sure that that really got built in 54 because in 1956 they pulled another building permit to build a breezeway and a double garage. So I think it might have been in 56 that it really got built because the breezeway dimensions in the 54 permit are not the size of what was the breezeway that we've now made into a full 4-season family room. But that's a little history of how that started out as 2 lots of record, were joined together to become 1 lot of record when the two lots were combined and the breezeway and the garage were brought together. But prior to that, it was 2 individual lots of record when the plat was made and approved by the city. So here's our neighborhood. The characteristics of our neighborhood are the schools. That's why we bought it. Our children are no longer school age, but they were school age, and so we had a son that was in Concord and 1 son that was just starting Southview when we moved into the neighborhood. So that's the neighborhood. And before I get to kind of the 4 questions that we have to answer to approve a variance by state law and by city code, I first want to kind of analyze my 500-foot ring. And so you all have the 500-foot ring, and I think it's important, or at least this is my view, it's important to analyze the 500-foot neighborhood ring before we get to the point of studying the questions that have to be answered, yes or no. And so in looking at the 500-foot ring, there's really only one other lot that's a 100-foot wide lot in that neighborhood. And so that's up on your screen now. You'll see that our lot is in the center, north is to the top of the screen, and over there in kind of the southwest corner of the neighborhood, at the corner of 59th and Concord, is a 100-foot wide lot that's improved with a Rambler that was built back in the 50s. So our lot only matches one other lot within this 500-foot neighborhood. We are really similar to, or identical to that one other lot. Further analyzing the 500-foot ring, I found that there were 10 lots that have 75 feet or wider widths. And they're enumerated there, listed out on that screen. And then here's a picture of them. So I kind of highlighted those in pink. And you'll notice that down in the lower right-hand corner, kind of in the southeast corner, there's 2 lots down there that are 75 foot wide. They started out as 50 feet when the Fairfax plat was platted, but when the homes were built on those 2, they took a lot and a half. So there's 2 75-foot lots down there. All of those that are up in the pink that's on the north side of 58th Street at the top of your drawing there, those are all in what's called the Concord Grove Addition. That addition, all the lots are a minimum of 80 feet wide. So they're much bigger lots there. You might recall that 58th is kind of a through street that takes everybody over to the school. There's no parking allowed on 58th. It's kind of a through street. So it really kind of separates those bigger lots and the Concord Grove subdivision from the Fairfax subdivision to the south. Nevertheless, they're still within my 500-foot ring that has to be analyzed for this. So that's just kind of my argument. But I would kind of make a point here is there's now 11 that I've talked about. There's the one that's the 100-foot wide lot in the southwest corner. There's the 10 that I've pointed out here in pink. So there's 11 lots out of this total of about 100 lots in this that actually meet the current 75-foot width. All of the other, roughly 90% of the homes in this neighborhood would need a variance to be built upon because they don't meet the 75-foot minimum width setback. There's also some lots that are a little bit bigger than 50. There's 6 lots that are between the 50 and 75-foot category, and those are pictured in orange on the screen. So all of the rest of this are lots that are 50 feet wide in size. So I thought it was important that when you look at this drawing, you see all of the ones that are in the neighborhood that are bigger lots are out on the perimeter of the picture. So they're not in the close proximity to our house, still within our neighborhood, but they're not in the immediate proximity. They're more out on the perimeter of the wheel here. All of the remaining 81 lots in this neighborhood are either 50 feet wide or 49 point something. Those are the corner lots are 49 point and a fraction. All of the lots on the subject block are 50-foot wide lots. All of the lots that are on Ashcroft Avenue are 50-foot wide lots, and all of the lots that would have a view of this property are 50-foot wide lots. And so here's a picture of that. So now I've kind of taken off all of the ones that are larger, and what we have left here are just the 50-foot wide lots and our lot. And I think that that's significant because what that shows us then is that all of the 50-foot lots are really in the interior, in the center of our neighborhood circle, and very close to our property. So that's my little analysis of kind of the neighborhood, is kind of looking at the particulars of that. And now I want to get to the kind of the main 4 questions. And the first question is kind of a compound question. Is in order to grant a variance, we have to see if this would relieve a practical difficulty and that the use that's proposed by the applicant would be a reasonable use. Well, let me start with the reasonable use. I think that's the less controversial one by the questions earlier. There are many, many lots in the city of Edina that are 50-foot wide lots, so I think clearly a 50-foot wide lot is a reasonable use in our city. Now, is there a practical difficulty here? The way I look at this for practical difficulty is if the variance were not granted, we couldn't do with the land area that we own the same thing that neighbors that own the same land area as us could do with their 2 lots. So, but yet we're zoned the same. So within the same zoning district, our lots that are the same zoning as neighboring 2 lots, we couldn't do the same thing as anybody else in our neighborhood without the granting of that. I think that's the practical difficulty as I see it. The size of our lot is, of course, twice the size of all of the other lots that you see. So as you look at the drawing here in front of us, everything on our street is 50-foot wide. The ones that are backing up to this, to the new homes that would be built here, they're all 50-foot wide lots. Everything that's highlighted in yellow on this drawing is a 50-foot lot within our perimeter neighborhood. The second thing, or the second question that we turn our attention to is correct extraordinary circumstances applicable to the property but not applicable to other properties in the vicinity or the zoning district. And of course, our property is just one of the 200-foot lots that are in there. We're twice the width of all of the other land that's on Block 7. We're twice the width and land area of all of the lots that are opposing us on Ashcroft Avenue. And additionally, every lot that's part of the Ashcroft Avenue streetscape that's within our neighborhood, all of those lots, all up and down Ashcroft Avenue, both in our block and the block to the south of us, they're all 50-foot wide lots. The next question is, would granting this be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance? And we feel that it would be. The proposed subdivision and variance would meet the intent of the zoning, as it would create two lots that are similar size to that of the other lots within the neighborhood. The proposed subdivision and variance would restore this property to its originally platted condition, which was two 50-foot wide lots. So originally, when this plat was approved by the city, there were two lots of record. They were joined together when the addition was put onto the home. And then finally, the last question is, would granting of the variance not alter the essential character of the neighborhood? I think in looking at the essential character, we always look at it from a zoning perspective. What are the sizes of the lots, the widths of the lots, the depth of the lots? And so when you look at my work that our surveyor did, we meet the median. In fact, we well exceed the median, because when you aggregate all of these, we're really like at the 3/4 level. 3/4 of the homes, or of the lots in this neighborhood, are 50-foot wide lots. So we're well past the median, which would be the halfway point. We're well past that. If the subdivision and variance were not granted, it would perpetuate a lot that's twice the size of typical lots within the neighborhood. It would forever leave our lot out of character with the neighborhood and the lots that it's adjacent to. And I think that granting it would put two lots that are more in character with the neighborhood. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And and there was a question on the tree. Yes. In our yard, there's out on the boulevard, so it's in the right-of-way, but it's still in front of our property, is an ash tree that the city had planted. And we've been kind of nursing the ash tree along with the forester that we use for the other trees in our yard. And so he's been treating that tree. It seems to be pretty healthy, is what he's reporting to us. And so we'd like to see that tree stay. I think you could easily work a driveway around that, either on the north side of it or on the south side of it, that would come into what's now Lot 18, the north lot. So that, I think, would be easy to kind of circumvent that particular tree, just kind of working around it. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. It doesn't take up that much of the space. The tree that's on the south side of our property is kind of a meandering, it's called a bur oak, and it has these kind of limbs that kind of meander around. And we've trimmed that a little bit over the years. That's a fairly healthy tree, but we've had our forester kind of, again, working on some issues with that tree and treating it over the years. We have done some trimming. There was a branch that went out over our neighbor's property, and that was trimmed up last year. There's one branch that, depending on how the second story would go on this particular, on a home that might be built there, there's one limb that might have to be trimmed back. So I think it would work. But at this point, all we're looking for is to be able to subdivide our property, make it marketable to builders if we do that, then at some point the builders would be back in front of you for their particular plans and meeting the tree ordinance, so they'd have to satisfy that.
Right.
Now I think I'm. Were there other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'll just. For Mr. Johnson, or you have one for him? Okay. Anyone? Commissioner Hobbs.
Yeah, could you tell me, have you spoken to any of your neighbors about what you're proposing?
Oh, good point. Good point. Is it still on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. We held a neighborhood open house meeting in our neighborhood on March, well, before we turned in our application, by maybe a week or something before we turned in our application here. And we held it in an open house in the block to the south of us. There's a builder that we asked him if we could house it there so that some of the neighbors could see what the new homes are like. And so that's what we did, is we held an open house there. It was on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. And we only had 2 people show up for the open house. And then we had 2 other comments by email. So the people that were there at the open house were in favor of it. The 2 responders by email, there was a gentleman that was in favor of it, and so he was in favor. And there was a lady that had a question about the depth of our lot, and she just said, you know, I'm kind of opposed to all subdivision, you know, kind of the whole, I just kind of generally am opposed to the whole concept of subdivisions. So that was her comment, and I answered her with an email about the depth of the lot, and then there was kind of no reply from her on that. So those are the only responses that we've had that would be like more of these formal responses. But we know a lot of our neighbors very well, and you know, there hasn't been a negative response for any of them. In fact, very positive. And we know almost everybody. Like I say, we've lived here in this neighborhood since 1981, and we raised our children here. We love this neighborhood, and we love the people who live there. So.
Commissioner Lee.
Could you, thank you for your presentation, by the way, very thorough. Can you give me an example of what you are not able to do now that your 50-foot wide lot neighbors are able to do?
Oh, certainly. Certainly. We own 2 lots, and so if you look at the 2 lots to the north of us, there are 2 houses on those 2 lots to the north of us. If you look at the 2 lots to the south of us, there are 2 houses on those 2 lots. So for the geographic 2-lot area that we own right now, we're not able to do the same thing with our land that is exactly the same zoning. It's all R1 in this area. So we can't do the same thing that the 2 lots to the north of us can do, or the 2 lots to the south.
I see what you're getting at. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that it would probably help if you just be more forthcoming. Obviously, you brought your realtor here, and the point is that your intention is to subdivide the lot so that you can sell it off as two properties again. I think what the practical difficulty really is that your lot in its current double state is devalued as a larger single-family home when surrounded by smaller half-size lots. That's what we're looking for. It's not that you simply are have neighbors of 50-foot wide lots, because you are able to do whatever you want to do just the same as they are able to. They just do it on a smaller lot.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I understand now your point, Commissioner Lee. Thank you. Yes. So, yes, we sleep in our house. We get up and, we use our yard, and so we're residents there.
So the practical difficulty needs to be stated in terms of the value to you. What is it that you are trying to do? And it's quite fine. I mean, when we review this, we understand that that's probably your intent. And I can ask you right now, although you've said, do you have any intention of renovating your home? Probably the answer is no. So in order to subdivide it, the hope is to sell them as two separate parcels. And I have no issue with the 50-foot wide lot. It's very justified in by everything that it's surrounded by you. But for clarity's sake, I think on the application itself, it could be a little more forthcoming and just simply state it as that, and that the difficulty is that the value of your oversized lot is actually devalued when you're surrounded by smaller lots. In other words, a single-family home of that size, most people would not want to be surrounded by all other houses that are half the lot size. So that's what I'm saying, and that is a true difficulty.
And I would agree with you. There seems to be something, and maybe Kim Moline could speak to that also, but there seems to be something in the real estate that people just like to be around similar. You know, they don't like to stand out. They don't like to have a neighbor be a home that's bigger than theirs. They like to have a neighbor be a home that's similar to theirs.
In fact, I was going to say your strongest argument was the fact that we often look at character. Usually it's in reverse, but yeah, I do feel that your home is out of character with the rest of the surrounding homes. What's unfortunate is that all those lots were originally small to begin with, and the homes that are being rebuilt on them are significantly bigger. So they're squeezing more housing on a smaller lot, which I have mixed feelings about, but that is sort of the nature of the market.
I understand.
Any other questions for the applicant? Well, thanks. Don't go too far. Something else may come up. So this is a public hearing. So if anyone wants to step forth and give us your thoughts, you can step to the podium and let us know how you feel. I don't see anybody rushing up. So with that, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, let's close the public hearing first.
So moved. Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Public hearing is now closed. Take it back up to the commission. Commissioner Nemiroff, if you had a question for Carrie.
Planner T, just one question. Assuming that the setback regulations that are for later tonight get approved, just because they're easy, what setbacks would apply if this property were subdivided and two homes were built on the lot?
5 and 7. 5 feet on one side and 7 feet on the other. Yeah, 12 total with no less than.
They could do 6 and 6 on both sides too.
Yeah.
And that was changed almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was a little over a year ago. Where prior to that, it would have been 5 on each side.
Yes.
I have a question. I think it's for Director Teague. The median lot size. I'm on the page A16. The showing the 500-foot ring. Is that the same? I mean, is that how you capture the properties to evaluate the median size?
Yes.
Oh, so these other properties on page 3. I mean, they're listing the ones that were approved and some that were denied. That was based on that same evaluation, that 500-foot, with the properties centered?
Yeah, we do that 500-foot median for all of our subdivisions. Sometimes those regulations dictate what the minimum lot size are. Sometimes they don't. In this case, the minimum lot size is 9,000 square feet, 75 feet in width, and 135 feet deep. The one that we looked at that's listed as number 7, when they ran that median, the lots were greater than 9,000 square feet. So the median then became the minimum lot size. So in that case, it was a little over 10,000 square feet was the minimum, and the median width was 77 feet. So it can vary.
Yeah, it can go up or down, depending on what's around it. Where it kind of gets skewed and where some of those other ones may have had issues is that 500-foot captured many subdivisions of many different sizes. So it makes it trickier at that point. Okay. This one's fairly clean actually compared to that, but a lot of other ones have many other shapes and sizes that go to it.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thanks. Any discussion? Commissioner Carr.
I just wanted to mention I'm in support of the variance application for the reasons that have been discussed tonight. I do agree that the practical difficulty issue is just a little bit unusual in this case, but there is a practical difficulty associated in not being able to use 2 lots and build 2 homes on them. So I feel the variance requirements have been met.
Other comments? Commissioner Forrest.
Okay, I'll just say, as I've had this hammered into me over the years through the HERE or continuing ed stuff or whatever.
You've been through a few of these, right?
Yeah, I'm the old lady on the panel. So anyway, as we go through the factors, practical difficulty, I still have difficulty with. And the reason I do is because I think primarily it's an economic issue, and that is not to be our sole purpose for, or our primary reason for granting a variance. That's what it says in state law. There needs to be more. But you pointed out it's a 2-part statement. It also says that the use is reasonable. I don't find it to be unreasonable to subdivide the lots. So I'm not coming down. I'm not going to hammer that one too much more. As far as what's unique to this extraordinary circumstances applicable to this property, currently you have a single parcel. It was platted as 2 lots, but it's a single parcel, so let's look at it that way. And you can do, I'm kind of bouncing back to practical difficulty. What's been done, you can do what you need to do on a single parcel. You can have a home. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. There's not a stream running through it or whatever. On the other hand, it is unique in the fact that there aren't very many double lots in your neighborhood, and I think that's an important thing to point out too. Usually the purpose of, I'll go on to the harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. I have no problem with that factor. As far as altering the essential character of the neighborhood, usually the purpose of changing zoning is to direct change. In other words, we were directing change toward larger lots when our zoning changed a number of years ago. When these lots were platted, they were platted for homes that were, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet was a generous house at the time. And now the new stuff that's being put up in that neighborhood is running more like 300 to 4,500. And so I think you have to look at, when you talk about neighborhood character, more than just the lot size, but what about the house size that's going on these lots? How is this altering the character? And I think it's really drastically altered the character in a number of neighborhoods in town. On the other hand, I will say, as some put it, the cow's already left the barn, because I looked up today and there are at least, I think, 3 new homes that are larger on your block, so the neighborhood character is already changing. Let's see, there's one other thing. I'm bothered by using precedent as a finding for granting the variance, because that also, each zoning variance is to be considered de novo. It's supposed to be looked at fresh. And it can be informative, like I said, but it shouldn't be definitive as far as our decision goes. It shouldn't mandate anything. So I'm uncomfortable personally with that in the findings, but I'm not... That's just a statement of concern more than anything. So I'm kind of on the fence with this one, because generally I'm very skeptical of these kinds of changes, again, because it's usually for monetary interest. But I can't say I'm personally strongly averse to it, considering the situation here. So I probably will support this. I'll listen to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, I will say, and generally I'm supportive of this, and agree with Commissioner Carr on many points. I think it's a reasonable use. The rest of the neighborhood is like this, so it's keeping with the character, and there are many other homes already on the street that have been rebuilt. All per city code, they're allowed to do that. Whether some people agree or don't agree, they're all for that. So in generalness and not to bring past ones up either, but in generalness, I have supported similar ones to this in the past, so I think I'd be in favor of this one. Commissioner Nemiroff.
I have one question. In the staff report we received, Approval is subject to the following conditions, and it has two conditions, and the second item has 7 sub-items. And sub-item F is a construction management plan will be required for the construction of the new homes. Would that cover compliance with the new tree ordinance, or is that just assumed in any?
Well, the tree ordinance is not part of the construction management plan. That's a separate ordinance, which goes into effect July 1st, technically. However, you could put a condition on here that if it's developed before then, or an application comes beforehand, that's subject to that. So anything, if they apply for a building permit after that or a tear down permit, it would be subject to that, but until that point, it would not.
Could we add something to that effect?
If you want to make a motion to that extent, you certainly could.
I would move, if we approve, that we add a sub-item 2H that development plan complies with the Edina tree ordinance, which is effective July 1st, 2015. If someone else has more elegant language, I'm definitely open to that.
Was that a motion to approve?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to end discussion, so if anyone else has any discussion, that's my motion. If okay.
All right.
If that wasn't, I'll take one over here.
I'll second it with my addition to the conditions.
Subject to staff findings and conditions, I recommend that the City Council approve the proposed 2-lot subdivision of 5825 Ashcroft Avenue, and the lot width variances from 75 feet to 50 feet for each lot, and the lot area variances from 9,000 square feet to 6,781 square feet for each lot. And an additional condition be imposed that the building permit, when any building permit is pulled, that it complies with the Edina tree ordinance prior to, and if a building permit is pulled prior to the effective date of July? Was that it?
July 1st, 2015.
2015.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion. I'll second the motion, yes.
So I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? Commissioner Forrest?
When you were talking about the oak tree, the bells started going off with me because of, I'm very familiar with oak wilt anyway, had a property of 20 acres with a lot of oak trees on it one time. But bur oaks aren't as susceptible to oak wilt as the red oaks are, but it is important not to prune or even sometimes disturbing the root zone during, I think it's between May and then until after September. You kind of have to leave it alone, or it's possible to expose the tree to disease or spread the disease to other trees. So just keep that in mind as you go forward with that. If you're serious about protecting that oak, that try to discourage any pruning and removal until after September.
I do have one friendly amendment under the conditions of approval, subject to approval, under 2D. It states there shall be no increase in peak rate or volume to neighboring private property. And I think that means for stormwater, right? So if you would, if it's okay, I would like to add that something like there's no increase or peak rate or volume of stormwater to neighboring private properties. If that's acceptable to the motion and the seconder. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So this does, because it's a subdivision, this does go to City Council, correct, after this. So thanks for your time. Have a good evening. So next up are reports and recommendations. First up is a variance for Kelly Hayes, and I believe this is from a couple weeks ago. This has continued to that point, so she was nice enough to show up again. And Commissioner Aker, if you just want to give us an update on that.
I will do that. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a return item, so I'll be brief. It is request for front and side yard setback variances
Property 6205 Wooddale for Kelly Hayes. The subject property is located on the east side of Wooddale. It consists of a story and 1.5 home it used to have a detached single stall garage that's since been removed. It is directly south of public property and also, north also there's a parking lot that is adjacent to an office building. South of the subject property is a single family home. Across the street is a pond, and it also backs up to a pond. Here's a photograph of the existing house, how it looks today without the detached garage, and the house directly to the south. A survey of the subject property that's been updated. This includes a color-up version of the location of the additions, which is basically a second floor above what used to be a half-story. They will be adding an attached two-car garage with living space above, and then also a porch out front of the existing home, where currently there's an elevated concrete patio. This is the grading, drainage, stormwater management plan signed by a licensed professional engineer. These are the plans that were requested by the Planning Commission. The plans that were submitted were hand-drawn by the applicant, and it was requested by the Planning Commission that the applicant return with professionally drawn plans. They are consistent with the plans that were submitted prior that were hand-drawn. There are both levels illustrated here in floor plans. It's a color-up version and indicating what is remaining in terms of wall area and what is going to be new. The second floor obviously will be new. They'll be removing the half-story above. They also included some wall sections. These were the original drawings. They are consistent in terms of dimensions. Really doesn't affect the variances. And again, this is the original drawing. And they have an inspirational photo of what they would like the house to look like. Staff does support the request. With that, the homeowner is here to address any questions you might have for the drawings that were submitted.
Thanks. Any questions for Planner Aker? Yes, Ms. Carr.
I just was wondering what's north of the property, and the reason I ask that is because I was looking at the drawings, and the north elevation view is of the side of the garage, I believe, in the first floor, and there's not a single window, and I'm just wondering what is on the opposite side of the what faces the house. Is that the parking lot?
A parking lot, and then there's a strip of land between the parking lot and the subject property, which is public property. It's owned by the city to access the drainage pond that's behind the house.
Okay.
All right.
That's fine. If there's a parking lot there, I don't have a concern.
Commissioner Lee.
Chris, could you put that photograph of the back of the house? Actually, that's the first time I've seen that photo, so I don't know if it was not in our packets. The existing home, the rear view.
The rear view of the existing home? The original drawing?
Photograph.
The photograph was of the front of the house, and then there's a photograph of the home that's directly to the south. Is that the one you're...
Yeah, can we just see those photos again? And I flipped through them. I might have seen it incorrectly or understood it incorrectly.
This is the front elevation of the existing home, a photograph of it. And then this is the house that's directly to the south.
Okay, that's the house adjacent.
To the south, correct.
Okay, directly south.
They're about
of it.
63 feet away.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Any other comments, questions?
I did have one more question. I know we've been through this a couple times, but I'm still figuring it out. Okay, so the height of the house is taken to the center of the gable?
For setback
average height?
purposes, the overall height is measured from the average existing grade along the new front building wall to the top of the ridge. That varies, I guess, if you're looking at the front of the house. It's about 26 feet if you're standing on this concrete portion. Otherwise, it's a little over 28 feet. The actual overall height could be up to 35 feet because the lot width is a wider lot, so it's well below the allowable overall height.
Okay, so right here, the report said it's 25.8 foot height measured from average grade to the midpoint of the gable. Which gable?
That would be on the side. So it would
Okay.
be this.
So when you say midpoint, it's that
Be halfway
triangular.
between, it'd be the middle of the triangle, basically.
And again, why is it that we take the midpoint of the gable versus just the ridge height?
Well, because that's how it's always been written in the zoning ordinance prior to even when I've been here. So
Okay.
it's just
But in any case, that's for purposes of determining the setback, side yard setback.
correct.
Okay,
correct.
so you have,
there is a difference in if it were a sloped roof or a hipped roof. We measure to where the shingles begin on the side yard, and so it's a lower measurement generally. So you do see a lot of hipped roofs on the side. We don't see a lot of gable ends on the side because it does have a tendency to make the side yard steeper, or side yard setback
yeah,
requirement
roofs
deeper.
are getting a lot more complicated now, so this is probably one of the more clean-cut ones. So, all right, so what we're doing here is 6 inches for every foot of
Correct.
the height above 15 feet. Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Chris. If the applicant wants to come forth and give us any updates as to what she's done differently from the last time.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Nice to see you all. 6205.
You even brought your helper again?
I did bring my helper. He's my good luck charm. He likes.
Hold on, I'm a good luck charm.
You are. So
This time, maybe.
Hopefully this
I've
time.
been
Last
reduced-
time, not so much.
I've been reduced to an inanimate object.
Okay. So what I did differently on the drawings was we had them put on CAD so that they were a little easier to understand, and then had it color coded for the commission on regards to what's staying and what would be added. So the red is what is staying, and you can kind of, there should be a little code on the ones that I had made copies for you guys. And then the green shows what would be new to it, just so that you can get a feel for the percentage of the house that was going to stay. So that's pretty much the only difference that's in the package, is that we just had them clearly drawn so that we could express ourselves better, and then note the parts of the home that were staying, and then what would be new.
I'm sorry, could you say what color is staying?
I think on yours, it might be different than the one that I have in front of me. I did a little code at
Red
the
is
bottom.
existing and staying? Okay.
Is it supposed to be the other way usually? I don't know.
I don't think it matters. I just was trying
Wanted to make sure.
what it was. So.
I understand.
Any Commissioner Forrest?
Yeah, so basically just the footprint of the living portion of the house versus the garage, which is going to be reconfigured some, that's remaining the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Lee?
Thank you for getting these drafted up, and you did it so quickly, so I'm glad you found someone to, or if you did it yourself, thank you very much. It
No
really
problem.
makes it easier to see. All right, because of that, actually, I have some questions.
Sure.
Obviously, I was looking for the so-called existing floor plan. So the existing floor plan is exactly what your house is now.
Okay.
What you've given is sort of a combined, here's my new floor plan, but here's what walls are still going to stay. So because I have not seen the rear of the house, what I'm trying to determine is how much actually has to come down, because there's a sense that potentially this might need to be a tear down.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner
Well,
Lee, I'm not sure that's our question.
Well,
here.
that would be a question for me then, because then that would be a qualification condition I would put on the variance that it needs to have a plan like that. But
Well, I mean, when the plans come into the city will look at it to determine if it is a tear down at that point also.
so if the city has determined it's not a tear down, that's based on 50% wall removal, and I'm not clear how much the wall's being removed. So that's my question.
Okay. Well,
All right.
if we go to the, if you would, I can sort of take you through it and see if I can make it
Yeah,
clearer.
particularly
Okay.
for the rear. And
the
I was
rear,
really
okay.
hoping, because there is a bump out in the rear that looks like it's remaining.
Yep.
And it shows up on your elevation, but now it shows a new sliding door in the back, so.
No.
I don't think so.
Hello? Okay, there we
There's
go.
working.
Okay, so as it relates to the rear of the house, the whole entire back of the house is staying the same. These windows that are, the first floor is exactly the same as it is right now. The second floor is going to be exactly the way that it is. We have to add on, I guess it would be a foot, because the ceilings on the second floor are not quite 8 feet.
Yep.
So we'll be adding on to them, not removing them.
Okay.
Okay.
I understand the second story is completely new. Back to the first floor level, right where your hand is. That
Yes, ma'am.
sliding door is new?
No, that's there.
That's there. Okay.
Yes.
And the window to your left, is
That's
that there?
there.
Okay, thank you. And this elevation shows a little bit differently. Now you've got the roof back in there, so we don't have that on our drawing, but that is staying then. It's definitely
Yes.
staying.
Yep.
Okay. And the door there to the garage is existing.
That would actually be new when the garage goes
Okay.
in, because that
Okay.
space is not there yet.
Okay. So on some of these elevations, I just wanted to check. If you could go to your section. The roof trusses, what's the purpose of that second floor? You've got that sort of that knee wall put in there.
The ceiling height, that when
yeah,
you talk
what
about the knee wall, am I pointing to what you're speaking of?
Is that your closet?
Yep.
Okay, and what's the purpose of putting that whole thing in there, rather than just not putting it in there? I mean, just taking the wall straight up. Well,
I
what's
guess
the
I'm still trying
second?
to understand how this relates to the variance in front of us, if you're into the building like this.
Well, because it has to do with the support of it. So I'm questioning some of the support issues, which I might have issues with, about if you're taking out that
So
much wall,
So
if
the
it's
variance,
supported.
so you're playing a structural engineer here? What
No,
are you
I'm just
doing?
asking so I can understand this.
Okay.
I don't know if I know the answer to your question. I know in looking at it from the bedroom. Here, honey, you don't need to touch it. Thank you. You're good. Okay. Go one. You want to hold that? That would be like a huge help. Don't bust out a wrap though. Where is the second floor? Did I go right past it? I'm looking for the. Okay, here we go.
I feel like a news reporter.
I don't. If you look at the page that I have up here, and we're speaking of this right here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This space right here, as it relates to the way that the gable is in the. Don't do it that quick. The gable is in the front. There, it's not really usable space, and I'm able to frame in his closet there. If I didn't have that, there's because of the pitch of the roof and the front. There's really not anything I could do there, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Okay, well, that is a very awkward condition. I'm concerned for the pitch of that roof, where it's being supported on that wall. It looks a little tentative. I also wanted to just make sure I understand the roof, your drawings on your elevation.
Mm-hmm. It looks like, give it over here. If you look at this here, these are the two lines for the dormer. This dormer is actually set back a little bit. So what I understand is this part that I'm pointing to here wouldn't be sided. We would bring the roof across like it shows in the inspirational photo. but it is set back. And if you look at the cross section, which is on pages, I could keep it straight. If you look at this one here, you can see that it's set back.
Okay, and then on your south elevation, could you take a look at that for a second?
This one here?
Your south elevation.
This one? Yeah, this is the south.
Okay, you're showing roof, your roof line on your front elevation is coming down below the gabled end there. We're seeing it from the side here. So your gabled end roof is lower in this elevation you're showing than the regular roof, the rest of the house. But from the front elevation, the roof line is actually much lower than the gabled. Do you see where your gabled end is there? Yeah. Do you see how low that is right there, that point where your finger's hitting? Yeah, on the right-hand side. It's much lower than now take a look at your gable, see where that roof edge ends on your gable?
This here?
On the bedroom portion.
This here?
No, over on the right-hand side.
Okay,
Yeah, your roof for that gabled portion there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's much higher. Okay. All right, there's something. The issue is, all right, from your elevation, just like in your section, when you are doing an asymmetrical roof like that, you've got substantial load coming down to that point, which goes back to my original question on this section. How is that being supported? Because you essentially truncated that truss. So just...
I didn't know that's what we were doing here today.
You are a licensed builder, is that correct?
In the state of Michigan, I am, yes, and
Okay.
I am not making my
I didn't
own
think
trusses.
any of
I'm
us imagined that we're going to go through all these details here right
No,
now.
not at all. But that's okay. I just want to get this taken care of.
It-
I mean, the trusses that are going to come from the lumberyard that are stamped by a certified engineer. So, this was put on, it met the code requirements when it went on to CAD. Exactly how they're going to make the omelet, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. On the north elevation view, that is your garage, and I just have one comment on that. It's just an aesthetic issue, but I really think that there is never a reason to have just a blank wall unless you're actually butting up to another building. That's essentially a party wall. Try to put something in there, some articulation, a band that denotes the second story.
Oh, just like a
some
board
window
band?
openings just to give you some light. They can be high up in your garage. They can be secured so that they don't operate. But it will give a much better view, and that you can actually see that side when you drive down your street.
You can, yep.
Yeah. So I don't like to see those kind of plain perspectives.
Okay.
The reason I bring up these points is because I think when a variance comes before us, I think that everything is under our purvey for review. So I believe if an applicant feels strongly that the house or whatever they're doing needs to be this way, they should be able to stand before it and justify every element of it. It's not simply only look at this portion and don't look at the rest. I'm sorry, but it requires a full set of plans, elevations, sections,
I'm really
and
sorry, Commissioner Lee, it doesn't require a full set of plans. If that is something that you want to make as a requirement to go through this process and have them come from an architect, then you need to change the code.
I didn't say an architect. It does require a full set of plans, and it needs to be understandable in a way that we can understand it as commissioners, what your intention is. I still feel it's not very clear as to the amount of wall that will have to be removed.
When you start digging into all these details, you're putting the city at a risk because you're saying you now approved the structural and the framing of this house too, is what's happening. You're going beyond where the variance is at to approve it. So essentially, potentially you're putting the city at risk to say, you now approve this that it met structural requirements or framing requirements. And that's when we dig into these things, that's beyond what the city, at least the planning commission's realm is typically within. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's not my intent to put the city at risk. I understand that I need to understand it myself as a member on this commission, but obviously I'm only one vote. But for me to, I think, ask those questions are probably within the realm of.
So one thing that can happen, you know, if you have these questions in advance, you could also, when you see the plans, you could talk to the city staff and say, I don't have what I need here, versus bring it to this point too. That would be very helpful also. So we maybe don't have these discussions that something is missing that they could know beforehand to tell her, so we don't come and try to redesign the whole place at that time.
Yeah, that's a good comment.
Thanks. Commissioner Forrest?
And this isn't a question for the proponent, so I realize, but I just wanted to, I think perhaps Commissioner Lee is thinking of, I wasn't here for that evening, but a variance was approved a couple of months ago that ended up being a tear down, and then moving forward, well, the variance was granted on the condition that it was not a tear down. So I would, and it had to do with the fact that after the fact, the builder decided that in their judgment it was not.
That's completely understood here.
Right,
it comes back to the city if it is a tear down. So,
well,
I mean,
but then the variance, in my opinion, they should have had to have come back for a new variance.
I don't disagree with that.
And so that's what I'm. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I would like to see is if that's a concern, then we just say, okay, as a condition of this variance, that if more than 50% of the walls, or it becomes by definition a tear down, then they should return prior to the variance or something like that. That's all.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion? There's no public hearing. We closed that last time. Was that your question? No. Commissioner Lee? You had another question for the applicant?
No, discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
So in looking at the variance, I think one of the things that was highlighted was how much of that actual area is in the orange is the part that falls within the variance on the staff's findings. So I looked at that, and I feel that is a pretty minimal amount, and given the location of the site, there are no homes adjacent. It's quite treed and wooded. In fact, it borders a commercial property. So I think there's a little leeway here for that, and because the amount of variance affected is pretty minimal, I don't have any issues with that portion. I do feel, though, that this is a significantly large house. Obviously, the current garage sits way back, and now it's going to be one continuous monolithic frontage on Wooddale. But neither here nor there. Again, my comments were related to trying to understand how much of it was actually going to remain. Many times during the renovation process, and I've stated that before, that we get into the situation where it would be clear if we had the plans in front of us that we would understand that the entire back wall is being reconfigured. By the time you're reconfiguring, you're not just simply leaving a wall and popping out windows and making them bigger or putting a door in when there is a piece of wall, but you will really actually just tear out the wall and rebuild it. So that was my purpose in trying to understand this a little more, is just to come to some understanding exactly how much was going to be removed. Obviously, the first floor needs to support the second floor. The entire second floor or half story will be ripped off with the inclusion of the entire roof. So it will appear to be just the box on the bottom, and that, in my mind, really determines is that a tear down, is how much of that first floor level. And without that rear of the house, it was pretty hard to determine or to understand what's there now and what's not. And again, I think that factors completely into determining whether or not a variance is justified.
Any comments? Any motions out there either way? Commissioner Forrest?
I move approval of the variance, item B 1508 at 6205 Wooddale Avenue, subject to the staff conditions and findings that are in the staff report. And I would like to add 2 conditions. One is that should it become by definition a tear down as a result of more than 50% of the exterior walls on the main floor being removed, that the applicant would need to return for a new variance because it would be a different beast altogether, and that some type of architectural detail be added to that north side because it is visible from the street, very visible, and I can let you expand on that as you would. I think the idea of a board defining the 2 stories as minimal, but some fenestration would be nice too, even if it's just fixed minimal such. And I think the applicant is being very gracious about both of these items. So,
thanks. Is there a second?
I second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We went out with her.
So next up is zoning ordinance amendments. These have come before us a couple times. Carrie, if you could just maybe give us a quick update, what's changed? I know Commissioner Forrest had some comments to the window well definition, which I think copies are everyone tonight.
Yes, certainly. The changes are in gray. There are 3 of them. We've defined window well to try to be all-encompassing. Existing code, we just talked about egress windows, where I think our intent was all window wells. So we've clarified that. And I believe Commissioner Forrest, as you mentioned, has some thoughts about some potentially added language to the retaining wall. The other is Section 3, where we've added the plan modification when it needs to return to the Planning Commission. We've added language regarding increase in impervious surface outside of any proof of parking plan, any change to the on-site circulation, and trees can be relocated on the site, they just can't be decreased in number. And I noticed it didn't come through in gray, but there was, on the very last page, there was a recommendation in regard to the non-conforming, replacing a duplex in an R2 lot, making it a little more conforming with the single family. So we've added some language there that talks about you need to have at least 50 feet in width and 30 feet on frontage on a public street, similar to that language that follows through the R1. So those are essentially the 3 changes. Just to quickly run through, Section 1 is allowing staff to administratively approve a lot line shift or a party wall division. Section 2 is the window well provisions. Section 3 is that plan modification that's been added and updated. Sections 4 and 5 is the procedure for rezoning, where we're going for PUD, reducing from a 2-step process to kind of a 1.5-step process, and 1 step for standard rezonings. Section 6 and 7 deal with building coverage and the side yard setback requirements, cleaning that up, making that a little bit more clear. Section 8 is the part of the code that I don't believe the Planning Commission has come to a consensus on, and that's allowing single-family homes in the R2 district. That might be one section that you discuss separately before you make a recommendation on the ordinance as a whole. And then the Section 9 is the building height. We're just making essentially a correction in the code. And then Section 10 is the non-conforming lot provision in the R2 district. So with that, we can open it up for discussion.
Commissioner Forrest, do you want to kind of update what you were thinking there or talk through that quick?
Yeah, first I'd like to request that we take this section by section, if possible, rather than attack all of it at once. So if we could
Are you suggesting we vote on section by section?
No,
or-
but discuss it section by section.
Yeah, I think that's what we
versus
did last time.
Hitting, each person hitting a bunch of
Do you want to
points.
hit the section 1 first and just
I
walk
have
through
no
it?
comments on section 1 myself.
Does anyone else? Commissioner Hobbs?
Yeah, on page 2, so it's section 13A3, the existing condition survey. Does it make sense to include trees as part of that? And also stormwater flow existing, where are the water flows currently as part of the existing conditions?
I'm sorry, what?
So page 2. So,
Yep.
number 3, under A,
Oh.
and 3 again.
I found it this time.
An existing condition survey. So what we have now is it says lot dimensions, all plat and recorded easements. So I'm suggesting adding existing trees, existing stormwater flow. That certainly would help me to evaluate.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but does this cover all applications?
Now, this is only when you're shifting a lot line, so there's going to be no structure involved. So there's really no need for that kind of thing. There's no structure proposed, they're just shifting a lot line. So we want to see the easements, we want to see the structures to make sure setbacks are met, but there's not going to be any building activity that's associated with the shift of a lot line.
So I think
Not necessarily, right?
That would be covered under a building permit.
Right.
So Commissioner Hobbs, I think what you're asking for may be in a different section. How they the application process?
Yeah, I
If
guess
the
if it's-
application process, I think, is only for,
If it's simply just the lot line
Yeah.
shift, yeah. And
I-
nothing
and
else.
I completely agree with you,
Yeah.
I'm just, that may not be covered enough here to, and there may be another section we should look at to
Okay.
If
get
they
that in
are
there.
submitting a building permit for an addition, they would be required to submit.
put all those things.
They would.
Okay.
Well, that's a good, as we run into this before where maybe they are now with the new tree ordinance, but previous to that, it didn't say trees and it didn't explicitly call out stormwater, did it?
For a building permit?
Or as a plat or a zoning?
Yeah, previously, say a year or two ago, you didn't need that, but now any addition, you need a grading, drainage, erosion control plan done by a licensed engineer.
Well, and trees weren't showing up. I guess my point is it covered, does the new tree ordinance cover anything that comes in to make sure trees are on the survey?
A building addition would, yep.
Yeah, anything with building permit. Commissioner Forrest?
But
I don't want to get real off track here.
no, I
but
know. I
think-
was just to build on that
It was
though.
my fault.
You'd referred to relocation of trees and moving or adding trees and things like that, and also checking setbacks and things, and all of those things could possibly affect the stormwater flow as well. So
That's a different section. We're talking only here about shifting a lot.
Purely the lot line.
Right.
Right.
okay, so there's nothing.
It's an imaginary line.
It's an imagine.
All right.
We'll get them again. When there's
Yes.
some.
Gotcha.
So-
Thank you. Sorry.
To that point, though, Carrie, if you could bring in what's required, maybe that's a good thing as a discussion point, just to understand what is required for applications and if there are any
For a building permit application?
for zoning, any zoning requirements or building permit applications. If we could, what's required by the city to come in? Because I know there's a couple times it's come up, like tonight, for example.
variance and
Variance
site
is
plan
what exactly is required or not required, and does it need any modifications? And I don't know
Certainly,
that it
yeah.
does.
Yeah, we've got that new checklist now for a building permit where all of these things would be included in there.
Thanks.
So I do have a question on that one. On page 2 of section 2E says, section 2 is party wall division conditions. E says verification has been provided that the building would meet building code requirements with the new lot line. Is that where you're catching all the other ordinances?
That is to ensure that there's a firewall that separates the two structures.
Okay, and by the way, there is no F there. I'm just wondering if there was a catch-all in there someplace that it meets all other city ordinances or something, if that would take care of this discussion.
Yeah, and the way it's worded to meet building code requirements, that can change over time. This way we're just covered for whatever the standard is for that separation.
I agree with his E to F too. Anything else on section 1? Section 2. Commissioner Forrest, do you want to tell us what you're thinking?
Yeah, this thing kind of stuck out the last time we reviewed it, and so I had done a little bit of snooping around, and I had to kind of recreate that this time just to actually communicate it. But there were a couple of points on just the way the definition was worded, that it's the clear space created by a soil retaining structure located immediately below a window. Some of these window wells are quite a bit larger than the width of the window, and also some of them step out. So when you're talking about just space, saying directly below a window, I guess that I would take out that directly below qualification.
So how should that read? Are you?
Well, I had put in kind of a definition that I won't say is ideal. I mostly picked from somewhere else that, let's see if it's in here. That it is the space maintained between an at-grade or below-grade window and the surrounding soil. The window provides drainage around the window and in some cases an egress route. That was a sentence that was just in that other definition. Basically, just to identify the fact that not all window wells are below grade, or not all windows that window wells are used for are completely, the sill is below grade. There are some that are at or slightly above grade. So I thought that was limiting. I don't think that's going to run into, usually those are smaller windows, so I don't think it'd be so much of a setback issue, but that was just a definition point. And also, I think probably the biggest thing for me is that any setbacks are measured from the outer edge of that supporting structure. And so that's where I was getting into defining what the window well actually was. Is it the space or is it the structure is that included in the definition? So I'd like to see setbacks coming from the outer edge of any supporting structure for a window well, because sometimes that's significant. It can be up to a foot wide sometimes. And then also, in my mind, I would like to see window wells in the front facade of a house, in the front yard, be subject to the regular setback lines as a regular house, because we've had some comment from the public lately about that kind of application being used, and it's actually, in their mind, affecting the view of the house. And generally, I don't see, you often don't see egress windows on the front of a house, but if they're there, I think it would be nice to have them comply with the front yard setback. And if it's necessary, then certainly it would qualify for a variance. So,
can I make a friendly suggestion? Is that we cover the definition of that, and if you want to propose that the window wells don't be in the front setback, maybe that's a separate discussion.
That's fine. However you want to handle it. That's just where I'm coming from.
My thought is just that could get into a lot where we may not get to any of this potentially. If your suggestion that should come back as something for Carrie to write up, that'd be fine.
I think Carrie also, he had addressed in a return email about the possibility of at least measuring setbacks on the side as is proposed here from the outer edge of the structure. So I would really like that.
Commissioner Carr.
Just thinking about this definition, what the concepts that have been discussed. Right now, Carrie, your definition says below grade, and the one Commissioner Forrest has mentioned is at grade or below grade. I'm concerned if you say at grade, isn't that just a walkout door on the lower level of a home? I mean, how do you define what the window well is? I mean, window wells typically are below grade. So I'm concerned if we say at grade, we may encompass a patio that comes off a lower level of a home. I mean, that's a surrounding space to the structure. I mean, how do you define it? I think the definition needs to be improved upon. I had some concerns with it too, but I believe that we need to give this a little bit more thought, look at another definition, maybe do a little bit more research, and then come back to this issue.
Our thinking behind the definition, with consultation with the building official and city attorney, is the issue of requiring that 3-foot setback on one side was to make sure that you could get from your front yard to your backyard, and while staying on your property on a level surface. So that was where we came up with, a lot of the definitions that we saw of window well, it typically did state that the sill is below grade. So the thinking is there's going to be some kind of a depression there, and because of that, we want to make sure there's that 3-foot clearance between the lot line and the structure.
So this isn't truly saying what we do with the window well, it's just defining it, right? So the setback would be where it comes into play, right?
Right, we're not, right. Just that outer edge as proposed by Commissioner Forrest, that we need 3 foot of clearance from the outer edge of whatever that window well is.
I think that's a reasonable thing for that. Is that?
Well, and also sometimes the outer edge rises significantly above grade, so it's going to be in the way, if similar to a low retaining well. So I think that's another reason for it.
So whatever it is, you still have 3 foot clear, even if you make it whatever, right? Is that Commissioner Carr?
Well, yeah, and Planner Teague, I think your discussion of the issue, I think your definition is better than saying at grade, because it is below grade. And as you indicated, the intent is to avoid situations where you can no longer walk on the side of the property from the front to the back, or vice versa.
Your comments to that one? Commissioner Lee?
Do we have a separate definition for egress window well? I forgot where we landed on that.
The thought here is an egress window well would be a window well. This is now covering any kind of window well.
Okay.
The previous code did specifically just state egress, but the intent again was to cover all window wells, so this does that.
Yeah, previously was too narrowly defined. And egress windows are by code have a certain size, I'm assuming. I don't know what that is offhand. On to number 3. Section 3, plan modification. Oh, or do you good with 2? Plan modifications. Any comments to that? Commissioner Hobbs?
When we're talking about the impervious surface, can we also talk about not just an increase in impervious surface, but maybe a change in rate, volume, and direction of stormwater on site? So it might increase, it might not necessarily be an increase in impervious surface, but it might be changing what is happening relative to the stormwater on site.
Could that be if the grading changes?
Yeah, and I'd be bringing those back. That I would think that would constitute a pretty significant change in something on the site plan. I don't know. I've not run into something like that.
Okay.
I mean, I think what you're getting at, the grading changes, that it comes.
Right. I mean, if they're going to do something that might not change the impervious surface, but they've changed somehow how they're managing stormwater on site. That's something we would see again.
Stormwater management has changed?
Yeah, I would think that's going to be a change. Typically the engineer is going to have specific conditions on there. Mm-hmm. And if they're going to be increasing that rate and volume, that's probably going to violate one of their conditions.
Yeah, number 4 says there's no change. One of the conditions is that changes are considered minor if there's no change to any condition required in a site plan approval.
Right.
So the question is, if that type of issue is included in the site plan approval, that would be addressed then. You would not be allowed to make changes.
Yeah, because you've approved a specific grading plan And to do something like that, I think they've made some changes then to that grading plan that's going to impact that, and I think we would bring that back.
Okay, so even if they're relatively minor, again, relatively speaking, that's something that you would bring back.
Well,
What do you consider?
That's what I'm trying to get
Yeah,
away
I
from, is that kind of
understood.
gray area.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
What is, right. It says no change, so then it's pretty absolute.
No change to any condition required in a site plan approval.
yeah, so we're relying on the city engineer and all the conditions that
Okay.
they've put on there on that project. I would think a change that significant would probably violate one of their conditions. But I could have a discussion with the city engineer, see if he's got any concerns there.
Okay.
I'd like to see it. I think that's an important enough matter that since we have an example of building materials and stuff, that then just include the any change in stormwater flow or direction as another example in that same section, so that it's really clear that when you look at it, it's like, well, all I did was regrade this so it's up instead of down. Then it's clear in the ordinance that, hey, you need to have your heads up on this one.
And I'm not opposed to adding that, but I think it's covered already.
I think it is technically too, but it could be. It's kind of interpretive, though.
Could add it.
Sounds like another one.
Planner T, what would you, instead of just leaving it open-ended, like grade and things of that nature, is there some specific document that we can refer to that's in the site plan approval?
Well, it would be the engineer's report, but I guess I'd want some feedback from the city engineer. You know, what if we say no increase in rate and volume to adjacent properties? Are we then now bringing every project back because there's maybe a slight increase, but it's something that he can condition as part of his building permit review that's not going to really change much on the site plan? I would just hate to unnecessarily have to bring something back for a minor adjustment.
Well, I guess that's kind of my point. Is I want it to make it so that it's pretty clear. I mean, because if you read 4 the way we're all kind of reading it, it says no change. Well, that's pretty prescriptive in terms of no change. So, I mean, either we kind of say it is that absolute. If there's any change, it's got to come back. I don't think we can actually. What you're saying is a good point. We don't really actually mean that. Or we need to actually define what we mean by degree of change.
The other thing, too, is it could be interpreted to say it says no change to any condition required in a site plan approval. The condition may be that the property meets the requirements of the engineer's report. That would be the condition.
Yeah.
And the engineer's report has specific conditions that may be general in nature. They may be specific. They may say that the volume can't be greater than this amount. But there still could be some specific changes that would still meet the conditions, but those would be changes.
Yeah, and if I could refer you to your staff report, the subdivision, the Ashcroft subdivision, the engineer's conditions on page A31, and his specific condition is no increase in peak rate or volume to neighboring private properties. That's a pretty standard condition that they're putting in most. So if they're violating that, they're violating the conditions that have been put on them for approval. And in doing that, we'd be coming back.
Mike?
No matter how minor that would be.
Yeah, he's saying no increase, and yep. He's probably at that time going to suggest they're going to have to make some changes to meet that condition.
So, number 3 says all proposed
Hang on,
revisions.
Hang on
Excuse
one
me, I'm
second.
sorry.
So I just going back to that one. Are we saying what's in there works now, or are we still asking for another condition? I guess
from my standpoint, if it really is the way Planner T is describing, that it really is, here's a condition, and if they are going beyond that in any way, no matter how relatively minor it is, that we would see it again.
Okay. Commissioner Forrest?
We put the conditions on, they don't. And here it's saying no change to any condition. So the implication is that we've changed the condition, and so they would have to bring it back. but we don't do it that way. So it's I would say no change to that affects the compliance with any conditions or something, some wording like that, because they don't change the conditions. Does that make sense? It's saying there is no change to any condition. It's the compliance with the condition, right? So that's the only thing. I had a couple of other wordsmithy things on this too. On number 6, impervious surface shall not increase. I would say to be compatible with the actual list, I would say impervious surface does not increase, because these are things.
Versus shall.
Yeah. And then number 8, trees to be planted may be relocated. That's an interesting way to do things.
On site?
Well, but trees to be planted can't be relocated because they've never been planted is all.
Well,
so
yeah,
I would just say trees may be relocated, but not decreased in number, must be replaced.
Existing trees may be relocated.
Yeah, something like that. I did have a question as far as what, on number 6, unless to add required parking stalls per proof of parking plan. So it reads a little bit funny on its face if you aren't familiar with the whole proof of parking plan process. So again, it might be less to add required parking stalls to comply with a proof of parking plan that's been imposed or something like that, just so it's clear. Because if I were reading this and I had no familiarity with our ordinances, I would go, what are they saying here?
And then one other comment on
Commissioner Nemiroff, you were up.
Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay. Commissioner Carr.
Just that tree issue again on 8. Trees to be planted. We might say trees that are required to be planted pursuant to whatever that ordinance section number is, may be relocated but not decreased in number. I think just a reference to the ordinance.
Anyone else? On to 4 and 5, procedure for rezoning. Any comments? Commissioner Forrest?
I have to look at my notes here. I'm looking at page 5 at the very top. I think, again, it was more in ways wordsmithing. The petitioner shall include the modifications and comply with the conditions at another time and by other documents. I would just change it. Petitioner shall comply with the conditions. I have to look at my notes here. I'm so sorry. The another time, the word another was a little bit puzzling. So I would just say, and that's a relic of having the different steps, but I'd say petitioner shall modify the site plan and comply with the conditions at the time and with documentation that council may require. So it was just rewording it versus include the modifications and comply, and then at another time with the documents or as shall be appropriate. I'm not quite sure where that would come into play, because generally it's appropriate if it's back to the council in a timely manner. I don't know.
I might suggest that we just strike that whole last sentence, the petitioner shall include. It really ends after, on its approval of the site plan.
Yeah, I would agree. Long way to make it clearer. Anything else on 4 and 5? just for the record, I still don't agree with no public hearing at the council meeting at the end, but I'll move along with that. So, didn't seem to be a lot of support for that. 6 and 7, building coverage, side yard setbacks. And this, just a little history, this was a clarification to essentially bring lots over 50 feet in width more in line with, or excuse me, 50 is, to make it consistent throughout, right, yeah, no matter what the size of the lot is. Commissioner Forrest, anything on your 40-foot lot?
I haven't dug into that one, so I'm good.
Hearing none. Commissioner Carr?
Planner Teague, on the window well issue, you had mentioned that one of the issues we were trying to address is the ability to access. You go from the front of a property to the back and have some side yard available to do so. Could be for emergency purposes. But the way it's worded right now is that it appears as though window wells, there is a side yard setback, but it's exempt. Window wells are exempt from the side yard setback requirement on one side. So just give me the rationale again as to why we're excluding one side, because theoretically then that window well can go up to the edge of the property line, which to me kind of presents a kind of a safety hazard for the person living on the other side of the property.
You could go right up to a lot line on one side if you have the 3-foot clear on the other side.
So if you have the two sides of the property, of the home, one side the window well would have to meet the setback requirements. On the other side, the window well could go directly up to the property line.
Right.
Correct.
And there's another provision, it's not part of this ordinance, it's in the existing code, that says you have to have that 3 feet of clearance, so that covers someone who's going to put a retaining wall in. We saw several examples of retaining walls that went right to from the house to the edge of the property line. So that provision's not part of this, it's already in code, is covered.
Originally we had the window wells to some other language, and that was struck down by the council when it got to that point. 'Cause I think we had it so it was part of the setback or something, didn't we?
I think you required 3 feet on both sides.
3 feet on both. It was 3 years. You're right. 3 feet on both sides, and they struck down the one side, so that's why it ended up back at that spot.
And I would argue for only having it apply to one side, again, because if you have a 40-foot lot and you end up needing a driveway on one side of the house anyway, usually, and a garage in the back because the house isn't wide enough for both without putting the house above the garage, since we require double garages. So that was the reason. I know I did look, when I was looking into this, though, I did see Minneapolis. I think they have a 2-foot setback requirement for window wells, but so some municipalities do have a minimal setback. But if it's, I don't think it's, I don't know. It's kind of up to whatever you think, but I'd like to just try it without having a setback on one side.
How does the changing from may encroach to are exempt simplify that or make it better? I guess I'm not understanding that. Isn't that the change here? Window wells, instead of may encroach in the side yard setback requirement on one side, we want to change it to window wells are exempt from the side yard setback requirement on one side.
It was to follow similar language elsewhere in the code. It's really saying the same thing, but it was kind of a consistency.
They're all exemptions.
Yeah, we have a specific section in our code that allows certain exemptions into setbacks or height regulations.
So it's to be consistent with the language we have for other exemptions.
Okay, so it was for consistency in other code language where we use this exempt. Okay.
So if the commission is of the mind of requiring a 3-foot setback on both sides, it would eliminate that whole little box there of the exemption on one side.
I'm just saying it got struck down a year and a half ago.
It did.
So, if someone wants to try it again, go for it, but.
The clarification I needed. I don't agree with it.
Anything else on 6 and 7? Section 8, the R2 district regulations. Now, I know we have a little disagreement amongst us on this, and I don't know, I think it's not necessarily about the language, but it's just about the concept of it. So I would just say if there's any language comments, bring them up now.
Is there a reason that on page 12, whatever it is, 3 in the top section, height 2.5 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less. How did we come up with the 35 feet without mentioning lot size and stuff on here?
That's consistent with our height overlay map, so we're just bringing them consistent with one another. It was a change that wasn't made when we did the height overlay map as a result of the comprehensive plan back in 2009.
Okay, so even if it's just a duplex that's plopped in the middle of a small lot R1 neighborhood, they can still go about 5 feet higher than the homes on either side.
Well, I don't know if we have any duplexes in the middle of a R1 neighborhood.
54th Street, the one we just approved is one. On 54th and Fuller.
Oh, on 54th.
Yeah.
There are single family
There's a few
homes
over there. They're plopped around the city. So that was the thing that occurred to me, was if they're in a neighborhood of other single-family homes and they just happen to be there versus being purposely zoned there, are they going to be subject to a different height allowance than the other properties, or would our setbacks actually limit their height anyway?
That's a good thought. We didn't think of that. So they would, unless if you are of the mind to allow single dwelling units, you could say subject to the requirements of the R1 district, subject to all the development standards of the R1 district.
The other thing is...
That would make sense. I'm still opposed to it, but if you're going to do it.
But if we don't, I mean, I'm still wondering if we want to...
Then they could build a 35-foot tall
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's
home.
something we want to address in our height overlay district or something too, because I know like in Country Club with historic preservation, they aren't supposed to exceed 10% over the height of the existing buildings on either side or something like that, I'm trying to recall. So there may be a way of addressing R2 buildings. So if an R2 building is torn down and a new one's put up and it's 35 feet versus story and a half houses all around it, it could be kind of jarring to the neighborhood. So.
Anything else on Section 8? Section 9, I think that was just an error, right? And Section 10, non-conforming R2 lots. This was to say they wouldn't need a variance if they're working non-conforming, and they still would be non-conforming, right?
I have a comment on Section 10.
Certainly.
As I read Section 10, and I assume that there are other sections that are intended to be applicable, but it just sounds like a blanket exemption. And I'm wondering if that's what's intended.
That is the intent. If you have an existing R2 property and there's a duplex on it, if you tear it down, you can rebuild it as long as you meet the required setbacks, height regulations. The way the code reads now, anytime you tear any duplex down, if the lot underneath is non-conforming, it comes before the Planning Commission for variances.
The building is still subject to all the conditions. The lot size. So
the existing non-conforming
yeah,
lot.
so if it's lot, so if it's only 7,000 square feet, it's always
Yes.
only be
Thank you.
7,000 square feet.
Thank you.
But that size of lot determines the size of the building you can put on there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So unless there's any other suggestions, this maybe comes back once more. I don't know, how minor, okay.
I have
You tell us
scheduled.
what your plan was.
I've scheduled, well, the public hearing was to be held at the city council last night, so we continued it to, I don't have a calendar in front of me. I continued it to their first. Yeah, it's been continued to their May 6th meeting. I would have
Okay.
to continue it again, which we can do.
So, let me offer this up. You
We're
guys
pretty
can
close, I
tell me, yeah, everything but Section 8, should we, maybe we vote on everything, but I would like to pull out Section 8 from our vote. And I guess the question is, on the other items, with what comments you've given to Carrie, is that, it seemed like it's picked up enough to do that. You're right. I think you're right. It's pretty close, and I think it seems like a lot of it was actually wordsmithing, and I agree. Probably one of the biggest changes is maybe just on the definition of the window well, but I think we've got that. Is that any objections to that?
Yes,
Or
if everybody's agreeable, I like the idea of having it measured, or the setback measured from the outer edge of the structure, if people are
Yeah, I think that
including
was-
that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the big
I-
one for me.
Okay. Well, I would take a motion to approve, subject to the minor conditions tonight on all of these except Section 8. If anyone so chooses.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. No nay. Motion carries on that. So back to Section 8. And this is about allowing single-family homes in our R2 district. And if someone wants to make a motion to approve on this, that's Commissioner Carr.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend adoption of the proposed Section 8 on R2 district regulations, which would allow single-family homes in the R2 zoning district.
Is there a second? Any seconds? Someone can second it.
I'll second.
It doesn't commit you to anything. Well, it can, but it still doesn't commit you to anything. Any further discussion on that? Commissioner Carr?
Well, as I've indicated in the past, I know Planner Teague, you mentioned that many other cities do allow single-family homes in R2 districts. I think it makes sense from an economic standpoint. There's a lot of old duplex stock in the city that would perhaps be suitable for single-family homes, which I think would only be an improvement in these areas. You'd have a mixture of homes. I don't think that's a problem. So I just believe, I think it makes sense to do that. It may improve the city in these areas, and I see no reason to object to it.
Commissioner Nemiroff?
I'm of two minds in this item. I share Commissioner Carr's desire to improve the housing stock. At the same time, I suggest that this issue may be different location by location within the city, and that desired zoning may change over time, particularly as we get into things like the Vision Edina, which may change our viewpoint of multi-unit housing. So I would recommend waiting for the Vision Edina before deciding whether or not to allow single-family homes in R2 districts without variances.
Well, my thoughts on this one are that, and I agree with the, remodeling our housing stock, but at the same time, I'm concerned there are reasons these are R2 areas. Usually they're a transition zone between, say, R1 and a commercial district. So I think once you start putting a lot of R1 homes in these districts, it may change and it may bleed over into what the commercial district wants to be as well. Also, I think this may be an opportunity now. What is affordable, I'm not really sure, but it would create other opportunities to have more housing in those areas versus one larger home, which, again, affordability is relative, but I think it may bring up those opportunities for some duplexes and affordable pieces within that. So that's why I wouldn't be supporting this piece. Any other comments? Commissioner Hobbs?
I would tend to agree, especially I think with the comments. I mean, during this transition period, I want for us to be a little more in control of kind of how we make that transition, as opposed to just kind of saying it's wide open. So that's would be my concern.
Commissioner Forrest?
I think, in our town, the R2 district is very spotty. Sometimes it's one or two houses in a neighborhood that are interspersed with the single-family homes, where it may be more appropriate to change over to R1 type of an approach. But I think that's a really good point about transitional areas, and also even if it's not affordability, it's changing the diversity of our housing stock, because they're probably, I'm not sure, was it Commissioner Lee who pointed out that there could be a very strong movement to transition these R2s to R1s just for economic reasons, and it could very much change the balance as far as what we have available in our city. So I think there's some issues to address, but I think especially the location of these different units and that are considered R2.
I'm not saying I would never approve R1 in there necessarily, but I would like the shot at it to make sure it goes through. Right. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Nay. Yeah. Motion fails on that one. Thanks for sticking to your guns, Commissioner Carr. So up next, the final report and recommendation, Pentagon Park. For all you waiting outside. Whatever you want to do.
Oh, I can honestly do it. It is of no difference to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gary,
I can just give a quick introduction here. So Scott Tankenoff is here, Hillcrest Development. He is the property owner down in the Pentagon Park. We have several new planning commissioners with us, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to invite the development team in to give a status of where we're at with this project. So this is the 43 acres that's south of the old Fred Richards Golf Course. There was a preliminary rezoning that was approved for the site for a planned unit development, and it was very conceptual. So they will be coming back, probably be done through two PUDs, one for the tower site, kind of the everything west of the Bar Engineering site, and then a second separate PUD, everything east of the Bar Engineering site. And with each phase of development, the development team has promised that they would come through a sketch plan with each phase to give you a first look at it. And then they would come back in for the final rezoning to the PUD for, in all likelihood, the first phase would be that west side. So with that, I will introduce, I believe Scott Tankenoff is going to kick things off and just give you a quick overview of the project and just have an open discussion.
So just to confirm, this is a report. It's not a public hearing.
Correct.
And it's just an
yeah,
update.
more or less just a project
so
update.
People know. Gotcha.
Yep.
Welcome back.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Oh, over here? Okay. Here you go. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Scott Tankenoff. I'm the managing partner of Hillcrest Development. Thanks for having us back. It's good to be back.
It's been at least a year, hasn't it?
It's been a little bit over a year since we've been in front of the Planning Commission. So, and 3 of the faces are the same, and there's a whole lot of new faces. And actually, to that end, part of what we wanted to do tonight was kind of not only do an update, but also take a little bit of a walk down memory lane of what we did and how we'd been working with the Planning Commission, as well as staff and the City Council for really going back into 2013. So again, we'll provide an update, and we really want to also have this be a good opportunity for questions and just have a good interaction. So I think, again, to that end, what I'd like to start with is just a brief video that's going to show the south site, which is a roughly 12.5-acre site where we did some demolition activity, and that demolition activity started in late 2014. It's rare that demolition can be looked as a positive event. That's really not, as a company, what we get excited about. But I think in this case, this was kind of an extraordinary circumstance where we had a building that was extremely blighted, a site that had really lost hope, a situation where people looked at it and just had very negative feelings. They would say ick or ooh, or can't you do something? And I think to that end, this was kind of an opportunity to clear away what was there, do it quickly, and also start to provide some hope and some vision of what could take its place. So with that, I'm going to start this video.
Let the whole thing burn down.
The whole thing was not burned down. It was only training.
I know. I just thought maybe you'd want him to keep it. Elevator core. How long did that take?
The demolition itself took a little over 2 months. There was also some interior demolition that we had to do, asbestos abatement, interior wall demolition, and that took about a month and a half. There was quite a bit of asbestos, which we'd quantified before, and actually, through the city of Edina, we were able to apply for and receive quite a bit of funding and support through the Met Council. We got a very nice TBRA grant for asbestos abatement, and also there were some wonderful grant funds that we were able to also apply through the city of Edina to deed to the redevelopment account, and we were able to get that as well, which was fantastic. And that was just for this site. Also on the northern end, north of 77th, we've been able to secure 2 other TBRA grants for asbestos abatement. So the project has really been received well. It's made a huge difference.
So grants, you don't have to pay those back? They were.
No, there are measures that analytics that we certainly do have to look at. It would be tax-based creation, as well as certain jobs that will be created and or relocated. So those are the analytics that they look at. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about who we are as a company, and I think since we've got so many new folks, I think it'd be helpful. So Hillcrest Development is my company, and I want to talk just a little bit about what we do and our lineage. Typically what Hillcrest does, and we are a third-generation company, we've been around since 1948, we typically look for projects that have some form of dysfunction to them. They maybe have maybe it's polluted, or maybe it's deteriorated in some fashion, or there's some sort of value-add component. That's what attracted me to Pentagon Park. The idea of something that was truly broken, something that didn't have a good sense of ownership to it at that point, a puzzle. And Pentagon Park was a tremendous puzzle that needed to be solved, with really over 2 decades of challenges that were created, and in a building that, when it was built, was quite a remarkable set of buildings, very well put together, very well engineered, and well maintained for a long period of time. But again, going back about a little over 20 years, they really started to slide, and they were not well invested into. People were not well cared for, and that's not really where business clients want to congregate, or where they want to make an investment into. So that's what got us excited in 2012. We purchased the site in 4 different pieces. Actually, the first part was in 2010, which was not technically part of Pentagon Park, but we purchased the main Pentagon Park parcels in 2012 in September, and then in 2013 in January, and then there was a final piece that we purchased in 2014. So it was an assemblage from 4 different property owners, 3 of which were lenders that had taken property back, which is usually never a very good sign either. And part of what we wanted to do, again, was try to figure out what could we do with this. Is there a way to salvage it, to make it function? And we really came up with a concept that we would take 5 buildings and we would stabilize them. And those 5 buildings are on the north end of the site, and I'll point them out to you in a minute on the aerial photograph. But the idea was that we would try to salvage 5 of those buildings, do them usually 1 or 2 at a time, and see if we could generate some interest. It's a marvelous location. It's in a great city, marvelous location. There's so many wonderful things about it, but the brick and mortar had not been well invested into, and nobody cared. And that needed to change. So we focused on those buildings, and we were actually able to fill them fairly quickly. And I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to point at these. There you go. So what we did was on the east end of the site, north of 77th, which is right here. This is 7600 Park Lawn. That's where Fidelity Bank is located. This building has been renovated. Where did I go? Oops, sorry. There we go. So this building has been renovated. 4510, 4530, 4570, and 4600. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the buildings that have been renovated. These 4 buildings are all basically clones of each other. They're approximately 50,000 square foot buildings that have about a 16 to 17,000 square foot floor plate, and they're buildings that really did not have very generous window lines to them when they were built. And so we made some changes in those buildings to try to make them more appealing. So I'm going to show you some stabilization pictures. And before we show you that, we want to show you what it looked like before, which I think is helpful. You saw some of this on the video. And also, this is on our website, and we have a website dedicated to Pentagon Park that we've been encouraging people to go to, and also the community to go to if they have questions about the demolition, questions about what's going on, concerns, and it's interactive from the standpoint of we want people to be able to bring questions to us and get some answers if they're curious about what's going on. These are some of the conditions we inherited. And this is what we turned it into. So part of our goal was, how do we change ceiling heights? How do we change perceptions? How do we drive more light in? And to that end, you can see where this window line is dramatically different. It's very, very different than what it used to be. And that's what we found with this particular product. We needed to actually create a showroom. We needed to take a space and speculate on it and make it into something that people could look at and say, you know what, this is interesting. I can have a floor finish that's a polished concrete floor. I can have something that has carpeting on it. I can have a ceiling that's exposed, or a ceiling that's a dropped acoustical ceiling. And this was a product that we've done in a lot of other places. We've done it in Northeast Minneapolis. We've done it in other cities, other suburbs. But candidly, everybody that walked into Pentagon Park looked at it and said, I don't believe it. I don't think you can do it. So we really needed to demonstrate that. And once that showroom was built, people began to believe. And we were able to take quite a bit of empty space in about 300,000 square feet in those 5 buildings and fill it up to a very nice, stable situation, which is good because we have some really nice businesses that are in it now. So some more pictures of that showroom. Here's a picture of the outside of the building now. Another picture of an outside. This is the inside of 4600. This is a space where a company called Garvin is located. A couple other outside pictures of 4530 and 4600. This one on the top is Garvin's lunchroom. That's another shot of Garvin. And so those are the stabilized pictures, which then bring us to 3 more slides. We're very excited to see what's going to happen with the Fred Richards property. And I put 3 slides on here that basically are the approvals of the Vision Master Plan that the council took action on last October. Those are really relevant for us because we're very interested to see how the trail connection will work. The 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail is a huge, huge, huge amenity for what will happen with Pentagon Park. We want to be able to provide an alternative form of transit for our site, and to be candid, it's not going to be light rail. And it's really probably not going to be able to be better served by bus service. I personally believe that the bicycle is the way to go. So to that end, we've made the commitment at Pentagon Park that we will build a bike center. And that bike center will be much like what has been built in buildings that really are truly trying to promote bicycle transit. We need to provide services that aren't common. The bike racks and the bike storage area for our tenants need to be inside, so that if you have a $200 bike that you're very fond of or a $20,000 bike that you're extremely fond of, you can lock that bike up with a high degree of confidence. That doesn't happen on a bike rack outside. It just doesn't. We need to be able to provide a place where we're going to be able to have basically a rack where you can put your bike up on it and you can work on it. There are some things that need to be done to basically promote it, not just to say we care. This can't be serviced by a 1 or 2 stall shower, so people when they're biking in have to wait or have to essentially not be able to take a shower, whether they recreate during the day or whether they commute in or out. So that's one of the things that we committed to, and that's one of the things that continues to stay with us. We need to build a meaningful bike center when we redevelop this project. So again, we're really excited to see what's going to happen with that. It's obviously a city project. We can't wait to see what's going to happen. We would love to see that take place because candidly, with that infrastructure in place, knowing where the trail connection will exactly go, how 9 Mile Creek Trail goes in, we can start working on the rest of our property. So we're kind of waiting at this point to see where that goes. But that'll be exciting.
So what you're saying is what happens here may determine when you do your property?
In some cases, yes. There are some pieces of property to the north. When we were here in March of 2014, actually, Chair Platter, you had asked me, I believe, a question about, it was a request of would we look at housing? How could we
I
look
still
at
have that request, by the way.
I understand. I figured you did. That is one of the things.
Northeast corner.
It's one of the things that we're seriously considering and looking at, and we've been looking at hard. When we know where that is, that lets us go into a direction we can start trying to really figure out how to make that happen. The infrastructure of where it goes and how we can tie to it, and also how we can complement it, is very important. We will have a lot of pedestrian and a lot of bike circulation within our project. We've committed to that. How we tie into everything is extremely important. So there is a little bit of a gap, and if we have to wait, kind of through 2015 for some of that information, it's understandable. It needs to be planned right, and I think your Parks Department is working toward that, and they do need some time. It can't be hurried.
Well, the 9 Mile Creek Trail, that's already planned through there, right? Isn't that?
I think we're working on that. We actually have a meeting next week to meet with staff and also meet with Three Rivers to understand, is it a tentative location, a permanent location? Does it take into account some of the plans that we put forward, just to try to understand what's happening? Once we have more information, we'll be in a position to best understand. I think it's a little unclear whether construction will take place in 15 or 16. So we're waiting to kind of react off that.
Yeah, I believe they're starting on the north part of that trail, I think. I could be wrong. The north part first, right?
So again, these are some of the slides from that approval. Which then takes us to another part. I'm going to introduce Bob Close of Bob Close Studios and Tom Whitlock of Damon Farber and Associates in just a moment. And they're going to walk you through a little bit about what we had worked on from 2013 through 2014 when we had the preliminary PUD approved. But this next slide is where they'll talk a little bit about what we call the 6 principles of the project. And those 6 principles really evolved out of multiple discussions that we had with the Planning Commission, with staff, with your consultants, as well as with the City Council itself. These were 6 principles that were very important. And all 6 of these principles are things that any good development, any quality developer, any quality property owner would look at and say, my gosh, we have to have these things. These are all things that matter. They're all things that are relevant. And in the marketplace, these are all things that people want. So there's, from my opinion, these are all must-haves. And they're all things that are committed to. There's a couple things I'd like to cover before I bring up Bob and Tom. As I've stated several times at the City Council and also to the Planning Commission before, we will not shed any additional water from our site onto the Richards property. There have been comments and rumors, and I have said this publicly. I've said it privately. I will say it publicly. If anyone would like to ask me this question again when we're back, you'll have the same answer. We will not shed any other water onto that neighboring property. That is not what we're interested in doing. That is not part of our project. That is not what we will do. So again, just want to reiterate it. We also have made a commitment that we will not direct or support the direction of any automobile traffic to the north of our project in any way, shape, or form into the neighborhood, the single-family neighborhood. That's something that's extremely important to our neighbors to the north that are north of the Fred Richards project, that are in the single-family home environment there. We would never be supportive of that. We will not be supportive of that. We will not ever bring that request forward. We won't support it if someone brings it forward. Again, that's something that was very important, that we spent a lot of time talking with people about, and a lot of people were very concerned about. So it's kind of, I don't want to say old news, but it's something that, again, I think is important to reiterate. It's not something we're interested in. We will not support it. So we've made a really strong effort to have a community awareness of what's going on. Thus, we built our website when we did the demolition. We have a link that people can submit questions to if they don't want to leave a call or a voicemail. We provided some emergency contact information, and we also provided a schedule of upcoming events, and we would plan to do that as we bring any development forward so that not only the community could look at something that's on the city site, but they could also look at something that's on our site, and our site we're happy to tie back and forth into the city site as well. So then again, people can get good, accurate information and can also ask questions of us, as well as always feel free to go to staff if they wish. There's a lot of past events that are on our website, such as the fire training, the demolition. We had a demolition event where we actually had some mallets and some spray paint, and we had kind of a everybody got to take a swing at the building before it was demolished. Never thought we'd have a demolition party, but we did. Again, I think it's important that we keep pictures and video and keep a good chronology of what's going on. The website address is www.pentagon-redevelopment.com. And again, you can get to that from the Hillcrest Development site. A second thing that we talked about doing that we had promised that we would do was that we would actually track the demolition. And by track the demolition, that we would track what our recycled materials would be. We would set good, realistic, aggressive goals. And that we would track those materials of what went where, what got recycled, what went into a landfill, what exactly was happening. We do not demolish a lot of sites. I think in my tenure of running the company, which is 25 years, I think we have demolished, we ourselves, I think, have demolished 2 buildings of maybe 4,000 feet in total. So we're not a demolition company. That we don't buy buildings to tear them down. This is our first real demolition. So to that end, I want to just bring forward some data here. Recycled materials, including crushed concrete that remains at the site for reuse in new construction. Scrap metals, miscellaneous salvage, asphalt, trees, and brush was 82% of the total project. So 82% of the total mass was that. Approximately 18% of the project materials were taken to a construction landfill, an appropriate construction landfill. That was right on the goals of what we had. We wanted to recycle as much of the former building as humanly possible. So it was kind of exciting, the idea of being able to crush that building on site and then be able to use that building material again, whether it's in a roadbed, in whatever material it would be, and not have to actually bring in a fleet of trucks, haul that stuff off site, burn the fuel to do it, put that extra strain onto the road. It was really nice to be able to do that. And as we go forward to demolish additional buildings, we will also track that data because I think it's nice to have. It's always good to have the analytics. And you know what? It really wasn't that difficult to do it, and we made our contractors aware of it up front, and I think it's something that's nice to be able to report back. So, a final thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be kicking off our marketing of the South Tower site, again, the site that was demolished. Cushman and Wakefield will be leading that marketing effort, and they are already in discussions, and we're in discussions with multiple users that are looking for space. The types of uses that we've been talking about are potential hotel, commercial use, office, medical, and some other business type uses. So again, things that we kind of thought would be consistent for the site. And there seems to be pretty good activity, but it is not officially in the market yet, but it seems to have some pretty good interest already, which is exciting. I think the final comment I'd like to make before Bob and Tom take over is in 2013 we made a commitment that we would come back to not only the City Council but also the Planning Commission with updates. And it's not just when we're going to bring something forward, whether in sketch plan or in a final plan review. We're happy to come back. I'm happy to come back, whether it's on a semi-annual basis or quarterly or every, whatever period of time. If there are questions or anything we can do to address anything or to just provide an update, I think tonight's maybe a little bit more of an in-depth update, just again because there's so many new folks that are on the Planning Commission. But we're happy to, again, we want to interact. We want the project to be fresh in everybody's mind. It's a project that's going to take place probably over many years. And I think it's a project that I've particularly enjoyed because we've had a very nice collaboration with the city. It's been very open communication. We've really enjoyed working with staff, and it's been something that we've really been able to build something pretty interesting already, even though we haven't built a building yet. We've accomplished quite a bit, and the goal is to really make this a signature project. And it's something that we're particularly proud of, that we were able to figure out the puzzle. That hard part is done. Now it's time for, in a sense, some of the other hard work, but the fun work. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bob Close and Tom Whitlock.
I'm Bob. He's Tom. For those of you who haven't met us. Glad to be here tonight. And you can tell from Scott's passion that he really envisions something very, very different happening at this site, Pentagon Park site. He was very clear with us right from the outset, too, that, you know, this is a paradigm shift, and he's thinking about this in a very different way than what you see out there today. And that's really what he charged Tom and me to be looking at. And so we dove right in, started looking at precedent projects around the world, really, and how people are thinking about redevelopment and integrating a lot of things into redevelopment that even a decade or 2 decades ago weren't even really talked about. And you're all well aware of so many of the issues that we begin to face as a society and so forth. So some of the concepts, the 6 principles that he was alluding to, Scott was alluding to, really are getting in more into mainstream thinking, and we latched onto these as being really critical things. The green streets speaks more than a street with trees along it and a boulevard along it. It also speaks to a street that can manage water and so forth, so you can control microclimate and so on with where trees are planted. So we're thinking more than just about the beauty of the place, but also the job it needs to do. And that is complemented by the integrated stormwater, where, again, some of the precedent projects that Tom and I were looking at have done masterful jobs of integrating stormwater. And of course, you've got a great precedent here in Edina with Centennial Lakes, and that the major feature in the center being stormwater management. So it became a very important part of our thinking as well. And right away we clued into the fact that 77th, which has bus stops along it, didn't have much in the way of sidewalks. A 4-foot sidewalk on the south side, none on the north side. We immediately felt that this needs to be a much different street. It needs to be a place for pedestrians to be comfortable, for bicycles to feel safe, for people to be able to access the transit that is happening there. And so the porosity of getting through on the green streets from the northern end of the site down to the southern end of the site became a really important part of this too. So that porosity of this site, as opposed to the way it is today, which is really kind of a wall between what is green on one side and what is gray on the other. More on that in a moment. Connecting west to east was another thing that we felt was really important, so that the site south of 77th at the west end didn't become just an isolated place separated from the rest of the site. So we talked about a number of ways that might happen, some at grade, some grade separated, and we'll show you an image about that, which you'll recognize again. Multimodality is an emerging principle that we feel very strongly about. As Scott says, the bicycle is going to play a major role here. It's the Three Rivers Regional Trail is often recreational, but more and more these trails are being used for commuting, serious commuting. The Midtown Greenway is such a great example in Minneapolis of a serious commuting. And so we believe that will happen, but it needs to be connected. Multimodality does not work unless you have ways to bring the systems together. And so again, that's the green streets. The porosity of that north-south movement ensures that people can ride a bike, grab the bus to the University of Minnesota in the morning from somewhere in the nearby neighborhood. And the last thing, one of the things that has plagued us always is parking. And that's one of the things that has characterized this site historically are the large parking lots with the buildings set back from those. So we started talking about strategies of shared parking, ways that Fred Richards Golf Course, the Richards property, could share parking with whatever is developing on the Pentagon Park project, in addition to also different kinds of strategies. For example, parallel parking, which is sometimes a lost art, but to be able to use a street to park a car, to go into a building, and not have to always take up a lot of area with surface parking lots. So a goal of ours was to make this not about surface parking, but find other strategies. So this potential to connect east-west, north-south, whatever you prefer, again, that has happened over in Centennial Lakes, where the water flows beneath, the traffic goes overhead, people are able to circulate freely, water is able to move. It's a great precedent that you already have here in the city, but we'd like to show you a few others as well that we explored. And recently, a group of about 25 people from the city of St. Paul toured several of these sites, so I've gotten the latest updates on what is going on in Europe. And this is in Berlin, it's in Copenhagen, it's in Stockholm, these various developments. And you can see from these images that water is, and how it's managed, becomes a tremendous asset. Suddenly it's a very desirable place to be. Property values actually are much improved by the way stormwater is dealt with. The notion of harvesting energy is active in many of these projects where they're using solar collectors and so on. So it's important, I guess, to underscore the fact that we're keeping our minds open about the ways that, as this redevelops over time, a number of initiatives could be integrated into the project that make it really an example, I think a terrific example for the way office developments can occur in the future. Here we go. This is one of the early slides that we landed on. You can see in the existing picture to the left, there's literally a wall between the green and the gray. And we don't feel that that's really doing the gray side a whole lot of favors. So the existing relationship, the image in the middle, shows that clear demarcation. And our goal really is the idea of bringing green right through the site and extending essentially the qualities of the Richards property through this site all the way to 77th as a way of making it a much more appealing place to be and doing many more services in terms of environmental issues. We went through a series of studies as part of our work looking at how connections could be made, what are the important things that are happening contextually around the site. So you see in the purple line 77th how important that street is, the design of that street, to having these two sections of the property actually relate to one another. On that west end, you can see how water is, we're conceiving as water as being a feature in that portion of the site. Thank you, Tom. And when you get up to the other side, again, this notion of the green streets, this north-south porosity of the site that allows people to get into the site easily, through the site, to actually access the new park that's going to be developed on the Richards property. So it's really trying to do a number of things at once in a scheme like this. And we don't know for sure where the regional trail will land yet. I think it's a good question and one that we want to find out about as soon as possible. But again, this is just showing another way that water itself can be a connector. Again, not unlike Centennial Lake. So you can see how water is coming down to the south and west. And it's basically saying that this is a feature that can actually span from public to private. It becomes a common element that can be used by everybody who works here or lives nearby. So these are just some of the ideas that we studied. And this was an early phasing plan. I think number one is right. You saw the demo that took place. But this is an early sort of phasing diagram that shows movement over time from west to east with redevelopment. But I think, as Scott was alluding to, it depends on who comes forward and what the market will yield, exactly how redevelopment will occur, what happens first.
So one of the things that was approved as a part of the first PUD was building heights. And so this diagram illustrates approved maximum building heights on the site. So if you look north of 77th along the former Fred Richards Golf Course site, This tan area along the park is 4-story maximum height. And then along 77th, it steps up to 5 stories along here. And then as we go to the Walsh title site, the only parcel north is 77th on the west side. That's a 2-story limit. And then south of 77th, the old tower site, that is a 12-story limit.
I'm sorry, this was done when? This was
part of the PUD approval, I want to say 8 months ago, 10 months ago.
Okay.
So some of the things that Bob talked about, the next series of slides are sort of typical street sections, but it was important for us to not only stay sort of 30,000 feet in the air, but really come down to the ground. What is this going to mean for pedestrians and for people circulating within the development and along the public streets and right-of-ways of the development? So this is a typical section of 77th Street. Today you have a 5-lane roadway. It's an important arterial, and it'll remain an important arterial. But there are 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, which will remain. But today there's a center 2-way left-hand turn lane, and so we're converting that into a green boulevard, still allowing for left-hand turns where necessary, but otherwise converting that into a green center boulevard. Again, beginning to slow traffic, make it feel a little more pedestrian-friendly. The boulevards on either side, as both Scott and Bob mentioned, on the south side there's a 4-foot sidewalk today, and on the north side there are no sidewalks. There's a number of transit stops along that as well, but no easy way for pedestrians to get to them. So we're showing a 10-foot boulevard on either side for a green boulevard for trees, decorative lighting, and then 8-foot sidewalk on either side of that. Along the park edge, we see this as an important connection between the development and the green space to the north, that this would be more parkway-like. Bob talked about parallel parking, providing convenient parking for people accessing Pentagon Park, but also the park in general. And then you can see the regional trail on the left-hand side of the diagram, and then a sidewalk on the south side of the street. The green streets are supporting streets, again, allowing traffic to move north-south, allowing parallel parking, again, trying to get away from surface parking, good sidewalk connections from 77th to the green space to the north. Today, there really aren't any pedestrian connections between 77th and the green space. So it's extending that green, as Bob said, all the way from the park to 77th Street and providing great connections for pedestrians. This is just another option for a green street within the development, creating parking bays. And then this is if there are internal streets on the west side, there are some internal streets, again creating spaces for convenient parking and pull-off, and good pedestrian connections from all the parcels to the green space to the north. So I think with that, you've seen a lot of demolition images tonight. So I think with that, we would open it up for questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Forrest, do you have a list of questions?
I have a list. But my main one is, when was the elevator tagged during the demolition? Was that during demolition, prior to demolition? Because when I was watching things come down, all of a sudden I see the graffiti up there. It's like, wow, cool, somebody was brave.
Well, that elevator floor got tagged?
Mr. Forrest, it actually was the penthouse that was tagged. I don't remember the exact date. I want to say it was in November. It was after our demolition event, which was in late October. And I remember driving down, I think it was a Sunday morning, and seeing it up there and the colors and everything and thinking, first of all, how did anyone even get up there? Because it wasn't like there was conveyance that was operating at that point. Somebody that does not have a fear of heights, that can see a lot better in the dark than I can, or a bunch of somebody's were there. This was a demolition site that had a lot of strange activity. Demolition sites in general, and we actually at one point, we put security on it. We had several break-ins to the site. We had several incidents of scavenging going on. We had a lot of salvage that walked away. There were a number of unsafe things that were created. This can exist anywhere. We've seen this in Minneapolis. We've seen it in St. Louis Park. We definitely saw it in Edina. So I personally believe there is a crew of people that go around and graffiti things, and there's absolutely a crew of people that go around and scavenge at sites, whether they're construction or demolition sites, and it happened here.
Thanks. I wasn't imagining things because it seemed like all of a sudden there it was when I was driving down 100, and I was pretty impressed at somebody's temerity or whatever, because it was pretty cool.
Don't say you're impressed. That just encourages them.
Can't help it. It caught my eye. So when you were tracking and recycling demolition materials, did that increase the costs for you?
I don't think it really increased the cost. I think it took more time, it took more effort, it took some diligence. We asked people that were professionals, whether in the contracting trade or in the demolition trades, to pay attention. And they did it, and they did a nice job of it. We did something that was a little bit different. We actually hired a general contractor to then manage the demolition job, which was a little odd, not maybe cost effective, but candidly it was our first major act on the site other than stabilizing buildings, which was also very major, but we really did not want to have an issue of a contractor not working during the normal proper hours, someone doing something they weren't supposed to do, debris rolling down the street, something inappropriate. So that cost some dollars, but that was an investment. But the managing of the demolition materials, no. It took thought and time, and candidly, just management. It was worth it.
And maybe it'll get easier as more people do that in the future, too. You're kind of laying some groundwork, perhaps. Then I just had little comments. When you talk about the possibility of housing, how do you see that feeding into the businesses? Obviously, you see the bike traffic being a possible feeder as well. Do you see that maybe even helping to decrease auto traffic? I had a question. I was wondering, electric car charging, automobile drop-off sites for shared commuting, and have you considered underground parking at all?
I may need you to remind me of all the questions, but I think I've got most of them. Having housing at the site will absolutely decrease the amount of parking that's needed. I mean, I don't think there's, in my mind, no question. No. I mean, that will make a difference. Again, I think there's some feasibility things we need to look at, and there's also a question where the infrastructure will be laid in. That will have a major bearing on it. I think the concept that was brought up of how do we keep this site active after 5 o'clock, I believe you brought that up. That is very much on our mind. And so where we plant retail, housing, as well as businesses, that's all going to have an impact on that. So when we know where infrastructure goes, we can make those decisions. We would like to make those decisions. But also infrastructure needs to land, and we need to know where it's going to land. And as impatient as we kind of are, we also need to try to be patient, because that also takes time, and there's other professionals trying to manage that process right now for Three Rivers and also for the city. So yes, I think we can decrease traffic or parking and automobile reliance without question. There will be some underground parking, we believe, with these buildings. The water table is at a certain height, though. This is a challenging geological setting. I don't envision that there's going to be multiple levels of underground parking here. Could there be 1 or 1.5? Sure. Will there be 3? I don't think so. I don't think it's feasible. So there will be some underground parking, though. And again, from the parking standpoint, our whole goal was to get rid of this gray versus green concept. It was to try to build more structured parking, which comes at a cost. There's a tremendous cost with structured parking, but we can make it look better. We can make it not feel like a bunch of cars. We can not make the car the focus of the project. And one of the things that Bob Close brought up very early on was when we take a look at South Joe, take a look at Pentagon Park back in the old days, it was solely based on the automobile. That's what everything was based upon, and we're trying to get away from that. We are still dependent on the automobile, but can we reduce that? From car charging stations, we are putting our first car charging stations into a project in Northeast Minneapolis. I would absolutely believe that there will be car charging stations at a new Pentagon Park building and buildings. It's something that our clients want, and it's the right thing to do. So yeah, that would be integrated in. If Christina Smitten, who's our Director of Sustainability, can also talk a little bit about that if you have more in-depth questions about it, but absolutely.
On the earlier version, I'm trying to remember, and I'm sorry I haven't dug through this to look at the old graphics, and some of them were to the council after we had seen things too. Was the parking ramp areas or the designated parking squares on the little map, the orange ones, it seemed like that maybe was in a more consistent spot here. You've got 2 in one location, 2 more toward the north side of the property, and I was looking at that and I thought, I like that because there's some variety, but also, obviously there's more access to the parking and things like that by putting them on the north side. But even though there's a little bit more variety, there's enough consistency that perhaps it makes it easier for people to navigate and identify where to park. So I'm not sure if that changed or not, but it's something that jumped out at me this time.
Commissioner Forrest, I think it will change, but I don't know how it will evolve because it will be dependent upon shapes of buildings, exact locations. The drawings are conceptual, but they're meant to really demonstrate what's the intent of what we're doing. And again, the intent is not to make the parking the focal point and not to turn it into a sea of blacktop. We truly have to, that green versus gray, if that has to be one of the things that we do not let happen. We cannot have this be a sea of asphalt. It is just, we have to be better than that. We are better than that.
Thanks, because that helped me to understand, that you're still at that conceptual stage. I wasn't sure how firm those were. I'm done.
Commissioner Hobbs?
Just speaking to that kind of sea of asphalt idea, are you contemplating anywhere green roofs or anything like that for some of the buildings?
I'd love to. Go for it. I think we are interested in exploring those kinds of initiatives as well. We are dealing with climate change, and so the ability to actually reduce the heat island. I think that a project like this literally flips 180 degrees what you see out there today, which is, of course, tremendous heat island, soaking up a lot of solar rays during the day and not being able to really use them. So we would love to be able to use the solar rays to be able to cool that site. And I think the emphasis on taking away surface parking, greening this entire place, using water, using green roofs, all of those things combined can have a really significant difference. Extraordinary. Yeah.
Thanks. Certainly, as one of the new guys, I really appreciated the presentation. It's very exciting. So thanks.
Anyone else? I think everyone's just taking it all in, I'm guessing, a little bit right now. So just maybe to get into this, but what do you see as the next steps here and timing, and a little bit with what's happening with Fred Richards and in particular the sites you have demoed right now? If looking in the crystal ball, when would you be in for some type of sketch plan or pieces of that? Whoever wants to answer, I don't care.
Commissioner Platter, I think that there's no precise scientific answer to that. We don't know. This is a market-driven project. There is some pretty significant...
Market's really good right now, right?
Market is good. There is some pretty significant early activity with users that have meaningful desire to come to the site. What we're trying to do, and I'm going to use the hotel as an example, we think that there should be some hotel usage at this site. And your Chamber of Commerce has been very active in getting a unique hotel tax passed in Edina, which is half of the hotel tax that it is in Bloomington, which is extremely attractive from a consumer standpoint, and it's also very good, I think, from an economy standpoint for your local economy. I think the Chamber's done a marvelous job of promoting that. To be candid, I think right now, if we wanted to go out, we could probably find a way to put a low service or minimal service extended stay type concept there. It would probably be low rise. It would would have 100 rooms or a little more, a little less, and we've done a hotel study. That could work, and that could actually bring a lot of service to this area. That's really not, I don't want to say it's not only the low-hanging fruit that's there, that's really not what I believe is best for the site. And if it's feasible to get a better hotel operation that's there, that can provide some actual service, that can have a restaurant, that can have some meeting rooms, that can have a fresh concept that is desirable, that people want to go to, that is different than some of the surrounding ones that have either been built or are candidly long in the tooth. That's what gets people excited. That's what provides amenity to other clients, to office users, to medical users, to want to come to a place because it's a destination. So part of what I need to do is I need to be patient, but I need to not be complacent. And we need to try to find the right use and the right fit that can get us to our vision, get us to the highest and best uses here, but also counterbalance that we don't want to wait 20 years because candidly everybody's been waiting 20 years on this site already. So it's a little bit of a subjective balance, but we need to try to find those best uses that are possible and feasible, and the market and the economy are good. It may not be good 6 months or a year from now, but it's a really good location that if we're intentional and if we're patient and if we can be deliberate on, I think we can be successful and we can have different uses. We can have the retail supporting the office, supporting the medical, supporting housing, supporting hotel, and that fiber just all works together, and it's a destination, and it's a great location, but if it simply is a nice looking collection of buildings, we have failed. This needs to be more than that, and that's why I think when I think about Centennial Lakes, that's a place that people go and they're not just working there and they're not just going to get something to eat and they're not just shopping there, they're not just strolling there, they're not just taking their kids and fishing there or playing mini golf there. It's all of it combined, and it's part of the fabric of the community, and that's what we're aiming for. That's the goal. So it's going to be a lot of different components that have to mesh, and to that end we have to be picky, but we also can't be too picky. So it's very subjective. I don't know if that's exactly the answer that you were looking for, but...
Well, maybe another way to look at it is, at what point do your carrying costs and whatever, when did that kind of become untenable, and when do you have to do something in a way? I mean, I'm sure it isn't free whatever you're doing here, or I don't know the economics, but, people usually don't sit that long on something.
The goal with this project has been, as much as possible, to freeze time, to not have the clock work against us. I think in a lot of developments, and we've probably all seen them, where someone just has to put something up because they have really heavy land cost or really heavy carry cost or whatever it is. There is heavy cost with this project to date. However, we are going to be patient, and it's going to be market driven. And if we can balance that properly and see past the end of our nose and be better than our peer group in that regard, I think we will be rewarded. So to that end, I don't know that we will be able to break ground in 2015. That would be great. That would be a wonderful thing to be able to do that, but that would mean we'd be through 2 sets of sketch plan here, sketch plan in the console, back for a final plan once we make modifications, a final plan at the console, all approved. And that also would mean that we would be in talking with Carrie and staff, which we will be in, getting input in the very beginning stages of what we want to develop and design. Because if it doesn't meet with some staff support and some belief by staff, we're not going to push water uphill. That's not who we are. That's not what we do. So I think that we are going to be back, probably not only updating, but I would like to think you're going to see us a couple of times yet this year. And I think we're going to have to be patient, and we may not be in the ground building anything in 15, or we might be. But I think the goal is we want to be building as soon as possible, but we want to be building with quality, because this is a really big site. It's 43 acres almost. And what we want to be able to do is build something that, where the last pieces of the property that we get to are much more valuable than the first pieces. And intuitively, the most valuable pieces right now are the ones that are closer to the freeway. That would kind of lead us to that we're going to be moving west to east. And right now the east is the least valuable. If we do our job properly, if we manage this properly, we will have a wonderful project from end to end, and that will also be economically rewarding, but we need to be patient, but not too patient. It is subjective. There's no analytical answer to it, but I believe we will be constructing things in 16, if not sooner. That's our goal.
Okay. Commissioner Nemeroff.
It looks like from your presentation that what you've done is you've refreshed like 5 buildings, about 200. I have a few questions about those. Are you successful in getting tenants there?
Commissioner Nemeroff, very much so. We've taken, out of the 300,000 square feet, there was less than 100,000 square feet of tenancy in those particular buildings when we bought them. They were, as you saw, very dilapidated. They were not desirable. We have over 250,000 square feet of tenancy in those buildings. They have filled very nicely. They are mostly smaller clients. The largest tenant, I think, has about 18,000 square feet. That's Fidelity Bank, and they were already there. The largest tenant that we have brought into Pentagon Park since our ownership is maybe 11 or 12,000 feet. So it's all smaller businesses, all smaller groups. And they all made the decision to move there, and it wasn't because it was the cheapest. It was a lot of different factors, and candidly, we took what was C- product, which is about as low as you can get in an office environment, and we turned it into B to B+ and creative class type use. And we turned something that was a big negative into something that was fun. And candidly, people like to be part of something that's fun and exciting and invigorating, and part of something at the ground level. And I think that that's a big part of what happened. The location's always been great. But also the fact is not a lot of people are putting money into their C+, B, B- type buildings today. Most property owners don't spend the money in them. They don't maintain them well. They don't take care of their clients. Renewing a relationship is infinitely easier than finding new people, convincing them that it'll be a good place. So I think it's been a lot of that kind of just buzz effect, but it's also been the fact that the people that have gone there that signed shorter leases have been renewing and staying and expanding, and the economy helps, but keeping those buildings up, stabilizing them, making them relevant is really important. It just can't be that it's clean and functional. It has to be relevant. And I think that that's what they found there.
And what do the current tenants think about the potential redevelopment of the area? I mean, I suppose there's probably some pros and some cons.
I think you'll see that there's both. In thinking about what's positive about it, candidly, the surrounding neighborhood couldn't have been worse with our buildings. So they're happy to see the South Tower come down. They're happy to see that amenities are coming in, such as we've taken Cradle Club from the South Tower site, and we're moving them to north of 77th to the 4530 building. And that will be a tremendous amenity for those tenants. The ability to have a high-quality local daycare provider that is cost-effective, that's a known commodity, is huge. The ability to provide retail into that area when we start to work on those phases is very important. We have clients that are extremely excited not only about the Nine Mile Creek Regional Trail, which obviously we're not responsible for, but connecting to it, providing a bike center. These are all things that are positive. And really what our clients want is they want to not have to get in their car to go get food, to go get amenities, to go get things, the ability to have conveniences. There are some clients that say, my gosh, am I going to be thrown out of the building? Am I going to have to leave? we think that the stabilized buildings, some of them will be in place for quite some time. I mean, I think you're going to see some of those buildings there 5-7 years from now. I think the Fidelity Bank building will be left mostly intact. We renovated that building a pretty far standard. But most of those buildings will go away, but that's pretty far down the road. And it's not in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think mostly it's been very positive. And candidly, I think what's also been so well received is that there's not really any product like it. Nobody's tried to make a creative class building anywhere in Edina, anywhere in St. Louis Park. And candidly, we're doing that in St. Louis Park at another project. And people are excited about it. They like the idea of being able to use their space to attract talent. And at the end of the day, the new buildings at Pentagon Park have to be about places that not only attract but retain employees, because that is the name of the game today. It's not about where the CEO lives. It's not about where the owner of the company lives. It's about attracting and retaining talent, because we're in an unbelievably tight job market. It is so tight, my clients can barely find a way to attract and retain talent. Their space is an amenity to do it. And it has come down to amenities, not just price, not just location, not where the ownership lives anymore. How do I attract and retain people? How do I attract and retain the new part of the job market, the millennials? Because candidly, I'm a dinosaur. I'm not in that. So how do we help that generation feel like they have been provided the amenities that they want? Because that is our workforce. And that, I believe, is the workforce you're going to see at Pentagon Park.
I suppose you're talking to potential tenants of to-be-built buildings, and this is kind of a conversation you're having.
Yes, and it's the same conversation we're having in the stabilized buildings and in almost every building that we have in our portfolio. In Northeast, in St. Louis Park, here, it's the same conversation. It's about, again, amenities, employee attraction, and retention.
Commissioner Forrest?
I guess as you're talking about sustainability and everything, I'm just curious, do you have techniques in place? I know there's different ways people do it, but I'm not very familiar with it, to make buildings as flexible as possible for different uses throughout the life of the building in order to maintain the life of the building. So, you know, if it's a medical office building, it can never be used for apartments, or if it's apartments, it can never be used for manufacturing, you know, that kind of thing. Are you looking at different ways to maintain flexibility of use?
Commissioner Forrest, what's in my DNA is, again, buying old buildings and fixing them up and repurposing them. So in a reverse way, that's just running through my veins. Taking factories and converting them into office, or food manufacturing going into different food manufacturing, or again, taking one use to another. From a new construction standpoint, there are some limitations. If we were to take something from residential to commercial, that's a harder task from what I know now. I will tell you I've never done it, because we were not housing developers, and I've not developed any housing, and I think I probably made that point ad nauseum in past meetings. We will find excellent people on housing, though, and we will find what we think are the best people to work on that. From the standpoint of flexibility in product, that's going to be extremely important. You're actually touching on something that we've been talking about with one group that's very interesting, going to the site, of how do they plant part of their operation at the site, maybe in a 100 to 150,000 square foot building, and then how do they bring the rest of their operation in to maybe a 300,000 total square foot building? Are we building an appendage first? Are we building the core of the building first? Are we building all the mechanical cores? How are we going to build in redundancy? Those are all design and engineering questions that have to get addressed. We're not at that point yet, but yes, to answer your question, those are things that we will think about, because redundancy in buildings goes to core value, which goes to basically what is the residual value of a building without a client. So quality of the building, the quality of its design, how flexible is it, that is absolutely on my mind, without question.
Well, it keeps things more vital for the community, I think, as well as eliminating some of the obsolescence. So I appreciate that.
I think the lesson of Pentagon Park is, if you don't keep it fresh, if you don't keep it relevant, you're going to have what you have. And I mean, it was as dead of a project as you could probably have. There's not a lot of blight in Edina. There's not a lot of blight in many communities, but in Edina, there's a handful of projects that have had some blight. I think at Southdale, there was a very assertive way to go after the challenges at Southdale several years ago and change some of the uses and change some of the focus on automobile and bring in different uses that actually brought in life and some vitality to the center. Pentagon Park is different, but it's the same thing of, it had withered from the inside out and from the outside in. You have to keep refreshing. You have to keep reinvesting, and these are living, breathing things. And if you don't keep moving on them, you're just going to have something that doesn't function, and that is universal. And I think in every building that we have, you're never done. You think you want to be done, but you're really never done.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything else, so thank you for coming in. Appreciate your presentation. Look forward to having you back. And with a nice hotel there, or whichever. At least said he was going to get one. So, thank you. So next up is correspondence and petitions. Just the attendance sheet is in your packet. Hopefully it's check yourself on there and make sure they've counted for everyone or not. Chair and commission comments. Any updates on the Southdale group? Commissioner Hobbs?
Yeah, actually, it's been going very well. We've had 4 meetings now, something like that, yeah. Being ably led by co-chairs Colleen Wolf and Michael Schroeder. So, yeah, I think, right now we're at kind of the thematic level and trying to figure out what we're envisioning on a pretty broad scale in the Southdale area. But I should also mention that on Saturday, we're going to have the check-in meeting 10 to noon at the Senior Center. So if folks want to come out for that, I'd certainly encourage folks to attend that. And we'll have kind of an update of where we are.
Great.
That's where we were at the graduate.
Correct.
Same place.
If I could just add to that, anyone who's in TV land also, and anyone interested in going, there's an event going on at the library next door. So we're going to put signs up directing people to park in the office parking ramp, which is, let me get my directions here, just east of the center. There'll be signs up to direct you into that parking ramp to park for the senior center.
That's on the Saturday meeting?
On Saturday morning, yes, from 10 to noon.
Okay. And where's the meeting tomorrow night? Is that here?
Tomorrow night is here at City Hall up in the community room, 6:30 to 8:30.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there is a meeting tomorrow night. They all are public meetings, but the intent is on Saturday is to have a more share out, correct? Gotcha. I just had anyone else have any comments? No, I just had 2 things. One was we talked about earlier about the Heritage Preservation Board, somebody coming in for that and just giving us a kind of update as to what they do. I thought, wasn't May Preservation Month?
Yes, so we thought we would do it
So
in
I don't
May,
know,
probably the second meeting in May.
Maybe the second meeting in May. I don't think it needs to be anything formal whatsoever, just, what they do, what they typically see. We see some of their stuff come in if it's a variance, but, for the most part, we don't see a lot of their items that come through. Or, when they get their, is it called a certificate of approval or appropriateness, excuse me, that they give to those homes in that area. And then also talked about having maybe an apartment walk or a Southdale walk. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. I was thinking maybe June. I believe the apartments at Southdale, I think those are all open now, right? And yeah. I know a couple buildings are going up at the Byerly's, but I don't think there's anything happening at the WIC site yet, is there?
Not yet, but they're very close.
I was kind of surprised I went by there and there was nothing happening there. I thought they'd be rolling on that by now. So I don't, obviously we'd have to public notice that. Is that something folks would want to do before a meeting or like on a Saturday. I don't, it'd be kind of summertime, so I don't know what might work best for folks.
Maybe before a meeting.
Before a meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be better than trying to get on a Saturday or something just for in the summertime, as most of us go somewhere on the weekends. It seems want to go somewhere. Okay, those are my updates. But yeah, Carrie, if you maybe one of our June meetings, then we could talk through that. Any other comments?
I have a comment. I was happy to attend the Grandview open public.
Oh yes, many of us were there tonight, weren't we?
Yeah. So it was nice to actually have an opportunity to go because, as you know, they've been scheduled the same nights as our Planning Commission meetings. So it seemed to be a very good turnout. I haven't been to one before. I asked somebody there, and they said it's about the same amount that showed up the last meeting, the previous meeting. But what's interesting is every time I go, they are tweaking those concepts pretty quickly. So even what we saw from Bill's presentation 2 weeks ago, there's new stuff. So I really got the impression that they're really at a crossroads now, and there's gonna have to be some decision made as to which fork in the road to go down. I think it's an issue of planning, programming. There's a lot of program on that site, and I could see how it's starting to work itself out a little bit. There seem to be sort of two major pieces now. It's really become a more or less a plan that involves housing and a civic use. So obviously that housing can still be defined in terms of potentially there might be some office use within that, but what used to be 3 pieces, which we saw, are now 2 pieces, major pieces. So I think for me the question is going to become how much can actually fit on that site. So it's an interesting thing, and it's also, I think the transportation, the circulation is becoming a much more evident piece now, because that's a very critical spot as you enter and exit off of Normandale and Highway 100. It's also the way to access up Eden onto Vernon. So a lot of things in play. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But it was a great chance to kind of see everything, and everything was on display. I think there were some boards that were probably from before that were all there for viewing. So it was a great thing to go see.
I don't know if you caught it, but I heard mention of a potential hotel there too, potentially as part of the residential.
I saw that on the sheet.
It was on the sheet, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think that was new.
That was a new piece. So
new piece. Yeah, I would
for me.
agree with definitely the transportation aspect around there. It's rather challenging. It's been challenging. So part of this piece, hopefully, will have a component of that in there. How some of that's addressed.
I think what you realize is just how small that site is. Yeah.
Well, great. Any other comments? Any staff comments? Nope. With that, if anyone wants to shut it down.
For adjournment?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.